40 will now come to order. Please stand for the playing of the national anthem. Councilmember Rosa de Padilla, please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, as we have Pastor Amy Aspen from the Short North Church come before us, I'm going to ask that this body, and on behalf of a grateful city, pause as we remember the life and legacy of Reverend Leon Troy Sr. Reverend Troy was a legend, an icon, a giant in this community who certainly led us from the faith community, but also as an African American led in this body, in this building, as an advisor to the mayor some 40 years ago. May we please honor Pastor, the Second Baptist Church, Reverend Troy at New Salem, and all those who knew and were mentored and led by Reverend Leon Troy Sr. Thank you, Pastor.
God of us all, and not just some. As we begin, we pause to center ourselves in gratitude, giving thanks for Reverend Troy and a life well lived, the gift of community, service, creation, and so much more. We also pause to bring the most vulnerable to the center of our minds and hearts. Those for whom rising temperatures are metrics of survival, those who go to bed hungry, those who are searching for housing and health care and access to basic needs, those who are afraid to authentically exist because of racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, and every form of hate. Keep our eyes open to how our decisions can protect dignity, lessen burdens, and build a more equitable future. Help us to create a culture of peace in a violence-weary world. And as this meeting adjourns and council goes into a time of break, may those who serve enjoy the gifts of rest, renewal, and recreation, and return strengthened for the work before us. In the name of all that is holy, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bankston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor Remy, President Harden. Any person who takes any actions to obstruct or interfere with the conduct of tonight's meeting may be charged with disturbing a lawful meeting pursuant to Columbus City Code 2317.12. Any person who enters those areas of City Council chambers reserved for city officials or invited guests may be charged with criminal trespass pursuant to Columbus City Code 2311.21.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can I get a motion to dispense with the reading of the journal? Clerk, please call the roll.
Bankston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor Remy, President Harden.
Are there any additions or corrections to the journal? Hearing none, the journal is approved. This week's communications received by the city clerk's office are listed on the agenda and will be published in the city bulletin. Are there any other communications to be read into the record?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll go around the dais for updates and resolutions, starting with Councilmember Bangston. Awesome. Councilmember Rosa de Padilla. Thank you. Councilmember Brown. All right. Councilmember President Pro Tem Dorrance. Oh, this is a good evening. Councilmember Favor.
Well, I got something. Good evening, everyone. August marks Black-Owned Business Month, a time for us to celebrate the amazing work of Columbus's Black entrepreneurs and what they're doing. According to Pew Research, only about 3% of businesses are Black-owned, yet we comprise 12% of the nation's population. We know this discrepancy is due to economic disparities that prevent Black Americans from being able to open their own businesses, and we must work towards eliminating that barrier. One avenue to do so is by uplifting and supporting already existing Black-owned businesses within our communities. To celebrate this month and to show my support, I will be posting daily Black-owned business highlights to my social media, and so if you wish to follow along, please follow Shayla Favor on Instagram, or you can follow me on Facebook. Next, I am honored to present Resolution 150X-2023 to designate August 31st, 2023 as International Overdose Awareness Day in the city of Columbus. International Overdose Awareness Day is recognized on August 31st, 2023, and is a moment to pause, to honor and reflect on the lives of those who have died from an overdose. Central Ohio has especially felt the pain of drug overdoses with the epidemic plaguing our community for the past decade. The Columbus and Franklin County Addiction Plan was developed in response to this spike in overdoses and is led by Columbus Public Health, tasked with the goal to decrease overdose deaths, decrease overdose incidents, and decrease infectious diseases. The city extends our sorrow to the friends and family who have had their lives forever changed by these untimely deaths and extend to them strength and empathy. I want to reiterate that we are committed to ending the drug epidemic in our community, and I will take any step necessary to do so. With those brief remarks, I would now like to extend the opportunity to Andrea Boxell to the podium for some brief remarks regarding some of the activities Columbus Public Health will be hosting to commemorate the day.
Thank you. First, I want to introduce my peers. This is Kaylin Poindexter with Columbus Public Health. She's the management analyst for the Columbus and Franklin County Addiction Plan. On my right is Michaela Elliott with the Franklin County Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Board. I think it's important to highlight the fact that this is a collaborative effort that we take very seriously in our community. We're not just trying to address the disease of addiction through overdose deaths, but also through infectious disease. And the only way we can do that effectively is to do that collaboratively across systems, across county, across city, and obviously through breaking down silos. Councilmember Favors, as well as the rest of Columbus City Council, thank you so much for the tremendous support that you give Columbus Public Health, as well as Columbus Franklin County Addiction Plan. Your acknowledgement that the disease of addiction has impacted our community through not only the loss of life, through increased infectious diseases, and through families that have been broken, is essential to the healing process that's required in order to give honor to those lives that have been lost and those families that have been broken. I have the pleasure of working with Columbus Public Health and Addiction Services, and also with these other systems. As I've mentioned, Franklin County Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Board, the Columbus Department of Police, Columbus Fire Department, the Franklin County Coroner, the list goes on and on. So with this resolution, it's really something that acknowledges the work that we've done collectively, but we're not done. And we recognize that through the numbers that you highlight that we've lost in the last 10 years. I need not say that if these were children, we would be devastated. Every day in the United States, a plane, a 737, that's how many people die every day in the United States due to the disease of addiction. So we'll continue to address it. On August 31st, I ask you humbly to come to St. Stephen's Community House on 17th and Joyce, where we're going to have a day of celebration for those lives that have been lost. It shouldn't just be about how they died, but also the lives that they lived and the families that have been hurt. They want to give honor and celebrate those families. We will be there that day from 12 to 6 p.m. I know we have Councilmember Bankston who's going to speak, and hopefully the rest of you who will be there who will help in that celebration. If you want more information about other activities that are going on that month, please go to the Columbus and Franklin County Addiction page on Facebook, or go to the City of Columbus cfcap.gov to find out more information. Again, thank you. I'm humbled by this. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, and you took the questions right out of my mouth. So just to, once again, it's August 31st,
Yes, ma'am.
2023, St. Stephen's, and people can get more information if they go to the Columbus Public Health website.
Absolutely.
Are there any questions or comments by my colleagues? We just extend our appreciation to the Department of Health for all of the work that you continue to do to support those who are currently facing addiction, and those family members and loved ones who are continuing to support, and then just also bringing some grace while honoring those who have lost their lives to the painful disease. With that, I move for passage.
Thank you.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Adopt it.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh.
That is all for me.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Remy.
Thank you very much, Council President Harden. A quick reminder that tomorrow, Tuesday, August 1st, is the 2023 National Night Out. It will be an evening full of fun, relationship building, and fellowship between neighbors, community leaders, city leaders, and Columbus Police. If you aren't sure what is happening in your neighborhood, you can find it on my Facebook page. Just want to wish everyone a safe and enjoyable August, a happy summer, and watch out for those big yellow buses that will start rolling in about 3 weeks from now. I know that it's with a wife that's a teacher and kids ready to go back to school. They have been, summer's over. So enjoy the rest of it. Good luck to all the students returning this fall. And that's all I have, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember. That's a rude awakening. Summer's over. Yikes. This evening, I want to recognize a servant in our community. I'm going to ask Clay Chambers to come forward. I want to take the opportunity to recognize Clay. Today's his last day of service, marking the end of an incredible 37 years with the city of Columbus. Come forward, the podium, sir. This is how we embarrass people on their last day. Yeah. Clay has worked across multiple departments, including Recreation and Parks, Parking Services, and most recently, the Treasurer's Office. Clay's work has kept our city running and helped us continue our proud tradition of strong financial management practices. It takes a special person to dedicate the balance of their life, 37 years, to public service. And again, I said this the last time we had someone who had served lengthy time with Columbus. You represent the best of the 9,000 folks who serve every day. Institutions are getting a bad rap right now. Public servants are getting a bad rap right now. And folks see the seven of us, they see the mayor, and they think that we are the representation of elected of public servants. The truth is, it's the 9,000 individuals who wake up every day, commit themselves to doing the work, never get any limelight or fanfare, but do it because they care. Because they want to make the city better and they want to take care of their family. So on behalf of a grateful community, thank you so much for representing us. Thank you so much for serving us so well. And as always, you have earned your next. So I hope that it includes some rest in whatever you'd like to do. We've already presented a resolution, so that we're not doing that again tonight, but I just wanted to make sure that we pause to say thank you in front of everyone for 37 years of service. And if my colleagues don't have anything to say, I'll turn over the podium to Ms. Deb first, and then to you, Clay.
You are absolutely right, President Harden and members of council. Clay Chambers is one of the finest people I've ever had the privilege to work with in all the years I've been working, and it's been a few. Clay is one of the most patient, helpful, warm, caring people that I've ever had the privilege to work with, and we will all miss him until he comes back to work part-time.
That's awesome.
So I just want to share my office's appreciation for the amazing staff person that he is, as well as the amazing human being that he is, in support of everything he's done for us and for me. I congratulate him on his retirement.
Congratulations. Mr. Clay, the podium is yours.
Well, I'd like to thank the city of Columbus for having me for all these years. It's been a pleasure working with you guys and serving the public. Again, I thank y'all, and I'm going to miss you guys for
Yeah.
about 3 months.
Would you introduce your beautiful wife?
And
Thank
this
you.
is my wife, Cheryl Beecher Chambers.
Well, thank you so much. Individuals don't serve, families serve, so thank you so much. God bless and Godspeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. Are there any comments by our elected officials, the Attorney's Office, Auditor? At this time, I request the following ordinance be removed from the consent action portion of the agenda. Rec and Parks Ordinance 1552-2023. Are there any other requests by members of council for the removal of an ordinance or resolution from the consent portion of the agenda? Hearing none, may we now have a motion to waive the reading of titles of third-day legislation by the city clerk? Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Thank you. Will the clerk now read into the record the ordinance numbers of 30-day legislation on tonight's agenda for first reading?
Economic Development Committee, ordinances 1831, 1833, 2186, 2228, 2305-2023. Small and Minority Business Committee, ordinance 2187-2023. Technology Committee, ordinances 2147, 2266-2023. Public Service and Transportation Committee, ordinances 2198, 2249-2023. Recreation and Parks Committee, ordinances 2096, 2099, 2100-2023. Education Committee, ordinance 2148-2023. Public Utilities Committee, ordinance 1880-2023. Workforce Development Committee, ordinance 2276-2023. Housing Committee, ordinances 2013 and 2268-2023. Health and Human Services Committee, ordinance 2233-2023. Public Safety Committee, ordinance 2242-2023. Environment Committee, ordinance 2291-2023, and Rules and Reference Committee, ordinance 1945-2023.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have one speaker on the first reading portion of the agenda. Mr. Nate Wilkins is speaking in favor of Housing Ordinance 2268. Mr. Wilkins, welcome back to council.
Arlington Avenue, Mr. Lothain, George Wilkins. I'm going to speak in favor of 2268, 2023. I'm going to be speaking in favor of it. I would like to see, instead of $270,000, I would like to see close to $970,085. I know this goes to the home repair also. I'd like to see that be more extended for people that are living in these homes to repair their homes and also to repair their garages. The amount that I'm questioning for the next 17 years is $997,078. That's for the next 17 years. For the next 35 years, I'm questioning for $970,000. And so this will be used for all over the state of Ohio, for the elderly, for people that staying in their homes having home repair. So I'd just like to see that be more extended. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins, for your continued advocacy in the housing space. We appreciate that and appreciate your support on this ordinance. Will the clerk read the ordinance numbers of those ordinances on first reading that require waiver of second reading?
Economic Development Committee ordinances 1831, 1833, 2186, 2228, 2305-2023. Small and Minority Business Committee ordinance 2187-2023. Technology Committee ordinances 2147, 2266-2023. Workforce Development Committee ordinance 2276-2023. Housing Committee ordinance 2268-2023. Public Safety Committee ordinance 2242-2023. And Environment Committee ordinance 2291-2023.
Is there a motion to waive second reading? Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
All right, the second readings are waived. The following ordinances appear on our agenda as consent action. Will the clerk now read those into the record?
Resolutions of Expression 151X 145X-2023. Economic Development Committee ordinances 1866, 1961, 1963, 1964, 1966, 2093, 2171, 2173, 2230-2023. Small and Minority Business Committee ordinance 2299-2023. Technology Committee ordinances 2142, 2174-2023. Public Service and Transportation Committee ordinances 2118, 2157, 2201, and 2243-2023. Neighborhoods and Immigrant, Refugee, and Migrant Affairs Committee ordinance 2212, 2213, 2214, 2277, 2284, and 2290-2023. Veterans, Senior, and Disability Affairs Committee ordinances 2158 and 2294-2023. Recreation and Parks Committee ordinances 2098, 2102, 2227-2023. Public Utilities Committee ordinances 1975, 1998, 2043, 2082, 2105, 2271-2023. Building and Zoning Policy Committee ordinance 2119-2023. Housing Committee ordinances 2126, 2178, 2179-2023. Criminal Justice and Judiciary Committee ordinance 2192-2023. Health and Human Services Committee ordinances 2006, 2074, 2077, 2087, 2091, 2181, 2262, 2278, 2279-2023. Public Safety Committee ordinances 2250, 2280, 2286-2023. Environment Committee ordinance 2258-2023. Administration Committee ordinances 2041 and 2034-2023. Finance Committee ordinances 2065, 2121, 2122, 2125, 2150, 2151, 2155, 2224, 2263, 2264, 2270-2023. Appointments from the Mayor's Office numbered A0, 156, 157, 158, 159, 160, 161, 162, 163, 164, 165-2023.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any questions or comments on the consent portion of the agenda? Hearing none, we have a motion for approval of these items as named as consent. Is there a second? Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bangston,
Yes, with the exception of ordinances 2158 and 2179-2023, from which I'm abstaining.
Ms. Barosa de Padilla,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Dorans, Ms. Favor,
Yes, with the exception of ordinances 2299 and 2126-2023, from which I'm abstaining.
Mr. Remy, President Harden.
Yes, ordinances are passed with the noted exceptions. We'll now proceed with the reading of 30-day postponed and emergency legislation. The first committee to come before council is the Small and Minority Business Committee. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Bankston. Councilmember, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President. First, in the Small and Minority Business Committee, for second reading, we have ordinance 2044-2023 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a contract with Columbus Compact Corporation, a nonprofit organization for business advising services for the Downtown Commercial Marketplace Program, to authorize an appropriation and expenditure of up to $150,000 within the Job Growth Subfund. Council members, you may recall, and I've talked about it for a while now, that at the top of the year, my office announced a revolutionary new program that we are temporarily calling the Downtown Commercial Marketplace that aims to bring the vibrancy and the diversity of our city's small minority business offerings into the heart of our city. This program, once up and running, would give ideally 10 small minority businesses access to first-floor retail space downtown with the following supports: a master leasing program operated by a third party with a graduated rent obligation to increase the sustainability of small businesses and allow commercial real estate owners to lease retail space to emerging small businesses with confidence that rent will be paid. A tenant renovation fund would flow through that same third party to provide grants or forgivable loans for the renovation of commercial spaces, to provide tenant improvement dollars to accommodate the needs of specific small businesses looking for downtown retail space. This also aids in lowering the per square foot lease price by creating value for all parties through the renovation and improvement of the spaces. And last but not least, the part I think that is so critical is technical assistance to those small businesses participating in the program to round out the holistic approach to the creation of this commercial activity hub in the targeted geographic areas of downtown. Our goal is not just to simply have minority, Black-owned, women-owned businesses in downtown, but it is also to ensure that they are sustainable in those efforts. The ordinance tonight establishes a contract with the Columbus Empowerment Corporation, as mentioned in the title, formerly known as Columbus Compact, to execute the technical assistance and the last support I just mentioned, and in another step closer to this program going live. I'm going to ask the folks from the Columbus Empowerment Corporation to come up at this time. And with us tonight in chambers to speak more about this partnership that we're really excited about is we have Ms. Kim Knights. She's the president and CEO of the Columbus Empowerment Corporation, as well as members from her team, Mr. Derek Pinnell and Dr. Iris Cooper. Welcome to the team. It was a very competitive process, and you all stood out in that RFP, and so really excited to be working with you. And know one of the things that we heard directly from those small businesses, us getting started before they even get into downtown. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Councilperson Bankston, President Hart, and council members. We are excited to participate in the City of Columbus's Small and Minority Business Committee's Downtown Commercial Marketplace Program, and to join the Department of Development as business advisors. Our team is comprised of Fletcher Law, Cressida Fletcher, Sankofa Enterprises, Evelyn Cleveland, Cooper Trust Services, Dr. Iris Cooper, COED, Center of Entrepreneurial Development, Derek Pinnell, Columbus Compact, doing business as Columbus Empowerment, myself, Kim Knight. And we're looking forward to using we're dating ourselves, 150 years plus of collective experience in economic development, business and real estate development, federal, state, county, citywide program development and administration, entrepreneurial experience, and group one-on-one business advisement. This advisement has ranged from management and operations for sustainability to financing and strategic planning for managed growth and scalability. We're also looking forward to using our real estate and finance experiences to assist in identifying the best first-floor commercial locations and the business types to be amongst the 10 businesses selected to expand into the city's downtown commercial area. And utilizing our expertise and that of our vast partners within the business ecosystem to provide direct one-on-one services, assessment and strategic planning, plan development and implementation to those 10 businesses selected to expand into the City of Columbus's downtown area, as well as the neighboring small businesses. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, President Knights, and for all the work that you already have done in this community and what you all are going to do. I'm really excited about this team's efforts. My vision is that we know that downtown is going to come back, and it's going to come back stronger than before, I believe. And with that, we have to ensure that it looks like the City of Columbus, that Black and brown and women-owned businesses see themselves not just thriving on the north side or the east side or the south side of Columbus, but they see themselves thriving in the heart of our city. When we think about a city, I believe it is like a body. We have the strongest muscles, the greatest brain at Ohio State, fast feet down in Rickenbacker to the south. But if we don't have a strong heart that is pumping blood to those other arteries, then our city will fail. So downtown success is so vitally important, but more importantly, that its success is inclusive and looks like the diversity of our city. So thank you for your investment and time in this program. I think what stood out to our team was that the approach that you all wanted to take was not a cookie cutter one. It was understanding that being in downtown is different, but also being culturally competent with the folks that will occupy those spaces. So looking forward to the work ahead. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? All right, seeing none, I move for passage.
Thank you.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. And Council President, may I go back to page 4 on the agenda? We have several ordinances on first read that were moved to second read.
Sure.
Thank you. Tonight, also staying in the Small and Minority Business Committee, for first read, we had ordinance 2187-2023 to authorize the Director of Department of Development to enter into a grant agreement with Freedom Equity, Inc. in an amount up to $1,500,000 for a microloan program to support small minority businesses, to authorize the transfer of $1,500,000 between the citywide account and the Department of Development, to authorize the expenditure of up to $1,500,000 from the general fund, and to authorize the advancement of funds on a predetermined schedule during the term of the agreement. Council colleagues, this body is very familiar with Freedom Equity, Inc. It is an emerging community development financial institution that was incorporated in 2021 to be an alternative lender for Black-owned small businesses in Central Ohio. To support their work in partnership with the county, the city has committed $1.5 million that will go towards their microloan program. With us tonight in chambers, we have Ms. J. Avery Frost. She's the Executive Director of Freedom Equity, who's going to come at this time. We talk about economic development last week, and I think we're seeing what that economic development strategy looks like in the city. And it is because of successful outcomes that we are able to invest in opportunities like this, being very intentional when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion to ensure that we are investing directly into Black-owned businesses. So, Ms. Frost, I will kick it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Good evening, Council. Thank you, Councilmember Bangston, and all of Council for this support and this investment. I also definitely want to take a moment to specifically as well thank Mayor Ginther, Director Stevens, and Jenkins for the support in getting us here today and making sure we had everything as needed. So as mentioned, Freedom Equity was created to help grow the local economy by seeding the success of Black-owned businesses. We are a Black-led, Black-controlled, and community-focused lending alternative that increases access to capital for our companies. And these companies have historically been left out of conventional lending. So our company was among one of the action initiatives of the Franklin County Business Growth and Equity Coalition that formed in 2020 to implement some specific strategies to support our businesses, because we do know, as I said, we're historically disinvested in, for lack of better terms. So we're able, as Freedom Equity, we incorporated in 21, we started lending this year, we're able to provide small businesses with smaller value term loans that they use for working capital purposes. So for inventory, supplies, furniture, et cetera. A small business, we see our businesses, especially without the banking relationship, they may not be seeking large enough loans to interest a traditional bank or even a larger CDFI. And they also typically don't have the right cash flow or the sufficient cash flow to afford the debt payments. But we look at it differently. We look at credibility and credit differently. We look at the whole business story and the whole business picture to see how we can invest and make a difference. A recent study by Kaufman found that nationally just a 10% increase in the number of employees and firms owned by people of color could lead to approximately 1 million new jobs. I specifically say that because we closed our first loan in March, One of the borrowers reported back to me last week that she's already hired 3 new people. They bought another truck. They're growing. It's been like 3 months. It's crazy, right? They just needed the cash flow. They needed the ability to stretch. And so we launched November 10th, 2022 for business, quote unquote. We started taking inquiries, et cetera. Since then, we've touched about 350 businesses, predominantly Black-owned businesses, who have come to us looking for technical assistance and figuring out how to navigate all of these resources, including like the ones you just heard about. And so we're here to be a resource for them. And since then, proudly, and actually tomorrow, it'll take us over 400,000. But since March, we've closed 350,000 plus in loans. So that's about 3 months that we're able to get that much money out on the street. And so this investment from you all will help us exponentially increase and meet the need. So during this period, we anticipate being able to do at least 25 more loans. Our average loan size is $48,000, if you're curious. So we anticipate about 25 more loans at our interest rate is 5%. So like investments like this enable us to keep the interest rate low, keep this money accessible and affordable for our people. And so we're going to do that. We'll also touch another 250 businesses in the next calendar year just with technical assistance alone. And it's all made possible, or exceedingly possible, with investments like these from the city to support the other investments that we're receiving from the public and private sector. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions?
No questions from me, and I'll pause if my colleagues have any questions. I just want to commend you for the vision behind this. And again, I can't stress this enough that when we talk about equity, this is what it looks like. It's not enough to just say that we pronounce and see diversity as a key issue in the city of Columbus. We also have to be intentional about how we and where we invest our dollars. And so really looking forward to the impact that this will make on our small and minority business. When we talk about that ecosystem and making sure that businesses are sustainable, one of those is making sure they have access to capital as well. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? All right. Thank you again, Director. At this time, I will move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy. President Harden.
Pass.
Thank you. Council President, may I move to the reading of first reads items on page 4 in the Technology Committee?
Yep.
Thank you. Tonight in Technology Committee for first read, we have ordinance 2147-2023 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to renew an agreement with Columbus FiberNet LLC for fiber optic cable maintenance services for CFN fiber duct systems in support of the city's fiber optic infrastructure, and to authorize the expenditure of $82,746.45 from the Department of Technology Information Services Division Information Services Operating Fund. The original agreement was authorized by ordinances 1296-2009, passed on October 5th, 2009, and 1327-2010, passed on October 4th, 2010. The original agreement was most recently renewed on April 4th, 2023 via passage of Ordinance 1137-2023, authorizing the required annual maintenance for the periods of October 21st, 2022 through October 20th, 2023. This ordinance authorizes the expenditure of $82,745.46 to renew this contract from the periods of October 21st, 2023 through October 20th of 2024. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy. President Harden.
Passed.
Next in the Technology Committee, we have ordinance 2266-2023 to appropriate $610,000 to the Department of Technology Information Services Division from the unappropriated cash balance of the Information Services Operating Fund to authorize the Director of the Department of Technology to enter into a nonprofit service contract with Smart Columbus LLC in an amount up to $610,000 to support the ongoing efforts and work of the Smart Columbus organization, and to authorize the expenditure of $610,000 from the Information Services Operating Fund. The Department of Technology, in alignment with Franklin County Digital Equity Coalition, are partnering with Smart Columbus to establish a program management office to advance the digital equity action agenda with a diverse set of stakeholders and partners. These funds authorized by the legislation will be used for items such as facilitation and administration of the Digital Equity Coalition, building the digital equity team dedicated to this work, execution of the pilot programs in alignment with the Digital Equity Action Agenda, building momentum around the coalition and awareness among community organizations and residents, and implementation of brand strategy. The services included in this agreement cannot be provided by existing employees, city employees, because of services are beyond the city's current staffing capacity to provide said services. Director Orth, is there anything that you wanted to add to this? I know that this is a big piece of our equity agenda around the digital divide.
Good evening, President Harden, President Pro Tem Dorrance, Chair Bankston. These funds will support our ongoing efforts in digital equity and inclusion. We have 80,000 residents without devices or connectivity and the ability to use the internet. The Digital Equity Coalition has been working since 2020 to develop this program, and as you indicated, it will also include our pilot for the first time digital skills training among 3 of our member partners in the coalition, which will provide digital skills training to members of the community. Upon their participation, they also receive a digital device or computing device. So we're very excited about this opportunity. It's a big first step for the city and for the community, and a foundation looking forward to, as you indicated, the agenda moving forward, and certainly appreciate council's consideration this evening.
Thank you, Director Orth, and to all of our partners at the Digital Equity Coalition. It's fascinating to see the 14th largest city in America, and we still have connectivity issues. And I truly believe that internet is like a basic utility now, and we need to make sure that everyone has access to it. So thank you again. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I'll move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Pass.
Council President, may I move to the Economic Development Committee on page 3 of first read ordinances?
Please.
Thank you. Tonight in the Economic Development Committee, we have ordinance 1831-2023 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a grant agreement with St. Mary's School, Inc. to authorize the expenditure of $500,000 from the Development Taxable Bond Fund and to allow for expenditures prior to the purchase order. This ordinance, along with the next 2 ordinances, are appropriations that were established and approved in the 2022 capital budget. I also want to point out that these 3 capital appropriations are also council priorities that this council put into the 2022 budget. So I want to commend my colleagues for these great projects. The bond sale for the 2022 capital budget took place on May 17th of this year, which provides the cash necessary for these expenditures. Seeing no comments or questions from my colleagues, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Next, we have ordinance 1833-2023 to authorize the Department of Development to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a grant agreement with Elevate Northland in an amount up to $500,000 to advance the planning, design, and construction of new community center space to continue providing training and business incubation assistance to the Northland community, and to authorize the expenditure of $500,000 from the Development Taxable Bond Fund and to allow for expenditures prior to the purchase order. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Next, we have, in Economic Development, we have ordinance 2186-2023 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a grant agreement with Ronald McDonald House Charities of Central Ohio, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $1 million to advance the planning, design, and construction of the new expansion of their facility located at 711 East Livingston Avenue across from Nationwide Children's Hospital, and to authorize the expenditure of $1 million from the Development Taxable Bond Fund. Seeing no questions or comments from my colleagues, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Next, in the Economic Development Committee, we have ordinance 2228-2023. This legislation is to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to amend the City of Columbus Community Reinvestment Area Agreement for the 3rd time to right-size the job creation commitment based on the revised reduced amount of square footage of the project per the Tax Incentive Review Council, the TURC, recommendations, and to determine the current carry-forward amounts. The largest tenant in this building associated with this ordinance, owned by the enterprise in this agreement, has communicated that they do not want to participate in the CRA exemption. Therefore, the tenant's square footage of and job numbers need to be removed from the agreement, hence this legislation. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
And the final ordinance in the Economic Development Committee for first read is ordinance 2305-2023 to authorize the Director of Department of Development to enter into a contract with Priscilla Tyson Consulting LLC to assist in the completion and opening of the Poindexter Village Museum and Cultural Center, to authorize the appropriation and expenditure within the Neighborhood Initiative Subfund, and to waive the competitive bidding provisions of Columbus City Codes. I will now pass the floor over to the Council President to speak to this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excited to bring this ordinance forward. Poindexter Village on the Near East Side is a place for Black families, businesses, churches, arts, and culture, a hotbed for touring and emerging artists, musicians, and leaders. You just look at the art of Amina Robinson that helped tell the stories of Black folks in our community. It's a beyond historical significance, but we almost lost everything when the highways ripped through that community and halted the moving forward of this historic community. Thanks to the James Preston Poindexter Foundation, they have helped us save the buildings at Poindexter Village and collected items from families, photos, and stories. So now we are taking further steps to preserve these memories in a special new facility, the Poindexter Village Museum and Cultural Center. This is a partnership with Ohio History Connection and local neighborhood leaders. It will tell the untold stories of this African-American neighborhood that was so central to Columbus. I believe it will be good for the neighborhood's economy as well, bringing visitors to Mount Vernon Avenue and Long Street. The city has already invested nearly $2.5 million in a fund to protect these buildings and bring this to fruition. Now we are bringing a tested local leader to help us move towards the next steps to engage partners. So I'm grateful that former Councilmember Priscilla Tyson agreed to take on this job. She understands the area. She has great relationships with the people and their passions to get this project built and on time and on budget. This was really important to me. That we move this project forward. This is part of telling our history, and we believe that with this partnership, it will be closer to opening the James Preston Poindexter Village Museum. So thank you again for leading this and bringing it forward.
Thank you, Council President, and I will say that, as you all know, that this is personal for me. The Bankston clan hails from Poindexter Village, and my grandmother lived there her entire life, over 50 years. And one of the buildings that is going to be saved, my grandmother actually stayed at 290 Champion Avenue, Apartment H. And so really excited to see that this piece of history is preserved, and the stories of the folks there are told and captured. And I know that former Councilmember Tyson is the right woman to move this forward, and we want to see this come to the community because it's been a long time coming. Any additional questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
That is all I have in my committees this evening, Council President. But I just want to say as we go into break, and I've said this before, economic development is about people. And just tonight, we passed over $3.5 million that will go to support small minority Black-owned businesses, that will go to support different nonprofit organizations in their capital budgets, and that is because of our economic development strategy that is working. It is about leveraging those dollars and leveraging those opportunities for the people of Columbus. So that is all I have in my committees this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that reminder. Next committee to come before council is the Public Service and Transportation Committee. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Barosa de Padilla. Councilmember, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President. We have one ordinance this evening in Public Service and Transportation, and that's ordinance 2081, 2023, to amend the 2023 capital improvement budget to authorize and direct the city attorney to appropriate and transfer funds from the special income tax fund to the Streets and Highways Bond Fund, to appropriate funds within the Streets and Highways Bond Fund, to authorize the Director of Public Service to enter into contract with Strasser Paving Company to the resurfacing 2023 Project 2, to authorize the expenditure of up to $13,056,064.94 from the Streets and Highways Bond Fund for the project and to declare an emergency. So this is another round of resurfacing for this year, and this contracts repairs and resurfaces 71 city streets and constructs 333 ADA curb ramps along those streets. And those streets can be found, Director, I believe, on our website. Is that correct? Thank you. So folks can see which of those streets are going to be resurfaced. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Second. Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Pass.
Thank you. Can I move to Neighborhoods, Immigrant, Refugee, and Migrant Affairs?
Sure.
Thank you. Ordinance 2189, 2023, to authorize a transfer of appropriation between object classes within the general fund to align with the City of Columbus grant guidance and to declare an emergency. As the front door to the city, the Department of Neighborhoods empowers residents, responds to their needs, and protects their rights. This work includes supporting nonprofit organizations that provide direct services to the community. I'd like to hand it over to Director William Scott to talk a little bit about what the funding is going to go towards specifically.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Chair Barosa de Padilla, Council President Harden, and members of Council. The funding that we will use is, just as you said, to be able for us to partner with community organizations through our work with My Brother's Keeper, the Commission on Black Girls, and our New Americans community. And so we appreciate Council's consideration of this request.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Second. Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Great. So, Council President, could I move to rules and reference on page 33?
Please.
This is ordinance 1984, 2023, to enact, amend, and repeal various sections of chapters of Title IX of the Columbus City Code to improve operational efficiencies, provide better services to the public, and provide for better enforcement of Title IX violations through civil penalties and fines. So I want to break this down for folks because we're going to spend a little bit of time here. Title IX is a series of codes that deals with the use of public right-of-way, and it essentially falls into two categories: non-commercial and commercial. So working with the Department of Public Service, I want to broadly highlight what these changes look like throughout the code in this section. So first, there were clerical changes or housekeeping edits to the code that just needed to be refreshed. Again, clerical, capitalization, who it might have referred to, those kind of changes. Secondly, it formalized a permitting system. So I believe that the language, and we're going to talk to the director in just a second, but the language was essentially asking for consent from the director. This is actually formalizing that in non-commercial instances, we actually need a permit from the director in order to be in the public right-of-way. And then changed criminal penalties to civil penalties. So those are the major changes. So we're going to dive in a little bit into what that means. So listening to public feedback and concerns from my colleagues, we pulled this code change from last week's meeting, and we had conversations both with Public Service, the City Attorney's Office, our own Legislative Research Department, to discuss how to best express both the intention of the code change, possible unintended consequences of these changes, and the best way for us to move forward. So I want to start by just getting clarification from the Department of Public Service Director, and I believe we also have someone else from the department here who will tell us what prompted the code change in the first place.
Yes, thank you. So President Harden, Chair Barosa de Padilla, other members of council. At this time, I would like Andrew Williams, Assistant Director in our department over all the permitting, to come forward, and he can get into the details. But while he's doing that, the biggest piece of, and biggest reason why we did this is to be able to hold contractors accountable who were not doing what they were supposed to do in the right-of-way. And this is all about safeguarding our right-of-way and making sure that it is safe for our residents. So Drew, would you like to dive into a little bit deeper details about why and how?
Yes, thank you, Director. Thank you, Council President Harden. Thank you to all the council members. Pleasure to be here to talk about this subject because it's pretty passionate about it. The primary reason is because the Department of Public Service, we manage over $12 billion or $11 billion worth of public right-of-way assets. Those are your roads, your bridges, your sidewalks, your curbs, ADA curb ramps, and the like. Over the last 3 years, even prior to COVID, what we've noticed was an egregiousness on entities to do damage to those assets. And that damage to the assets was not caught because we did not have boots on the ground code enforcement to actually do so. Also, we have repeat offenders of people who are actually doing that as well. This has taken away a very vital part of the community in terms of its infrastructure by taking away sidewalks, curb, and those kind of things that we rely on for our folks to get around, not to mention our roadway lanes where we're taking away and creating congestion type issues. So this is what prompted us to actually do that. If you can see, well.
Yeah, we have
that image is in
a
front of me.
little show and tell if we want to show some examples.
So these are some of the pictures of some of the things that we're talking about. When we talk about commercial activity, we're talking about those people who are providing services or actually getting paid for those services. Those are the contractors and things that get, do work, construction, or what have you, utility work and what have you in the public right of way. We've seen an enormous uptick in this type of behavior in what you see here. The bottom right-hand corner is one that came up here recently, in which we had several 311 calls because residents were complaining that something had happened and took away their sidewalk. It also took away their curb. It was actually a demolition project where the contractor didn't feel like it was their responsibility to actually have to take care of it. We were successfully able to mitigate that, and 2 weeks ago, we were able to replace that sidewalk and also that curb in pretty quick fashion because we had boots on the ground. But we have no citation privileges in terms of dealing with this egregious behavior whatsoever. So we get repeat offenders who do this because it's pretty much a slap on the wrist. If I get caught, you make me do something, maybe not, but there's no citation privilege for our boots on the ground to be able to handle that. As far as the non-commercial activities, this was put in place back around 2012 to deal with people who wanted to actually be able to put up protests or put a structure up to be able to do things like protests or public dissemination of information, religious types, and so on and so forth. And so we put code in place, or the city put code in place to help deal with that in terms of you must seek a permit for the non-commercial activity. Non-commercial activity are the ones who are non-for-profit, who are not trying to actually make money, but actually want to be able to use the public right-of-way space to be able to do the work that they feel is necessary for their cause. And that's what that was placed there for. So these are the reasons why we actually ended up here. We did a progress improvement or a performance improvement exercise 3 years ago during COVID to identify some of the recommendations. We vetted this not only with our contractors, the general public, but also other city departments to figure out what we should do. And this puts us further in line with other departments like building and zoning and folks who, boots on the ground, have citation privileges, and otherwise we do not.
So, Assistant Director, just to put a fine point on it, so the definition of commercial, we're talking about contractors. So some of the pictures that we saw here where there was egregious behavior, where folks were not cleaning up, not finishing work, et cetera, they were not, from my understanding, in all situations pulling a permit because there was not, and there wasn't a way to hold them accountable. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so the second piece of this is the non-commercial piece, which I think is a piece where folks had concerns around how are we defining all persons or how are we defining structures. So I know you gave some examples, but if you could spend a little bit more time here, because I think that's where there were concerns around unintended consequences. The intention of this is for who then again, in terms of non-commercial, how we're defining that?
These are people or entities who are not-for-profit, who want to utilize the public roadway space or the public space to be able to set up structures, to be able to pass out information, to be able to rally or different things along that nature. those who the non-commercial folks are. They're not-for-profit organizations.
And I believe that some of this is also event-related. So if there was a festival or if there was something else that was in a particular night right away, that first of all, the process would be that they would ask for a permit, which was not a formalized process before. And then secondly, that they could then be held accountable for the cleanup after the said event or whatever took place. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then we removed the criminal penalty and added a civil penalty so that for what purpose?
The primary reason for that is that the more you get of these, then we have to task our public safety counterparts to have to take away from probably more serious crimes to go deal with things that are just of a smaller nature that we could actually deal with in-house in public service.
And this would also give us the ability, like, let's say there was a neighborhood event or whatever, that we could actually work with residents to address whatever the matter is, not to actually be harmful, but this would provide us an opportunity to have a conversation for that cleanup or remediation to take place. Is that correct? Okay. I have questions, but are there other questions, Councilmember?
Well, just, I apologize.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Barosa de Padilla. So just as we're talking about the non-contractor entities, organizations that could be utilizing the public right-of-way for whatever cause it may be, what will outreach look like to inform residents that this is a new process? Because this is new, correct? If we're now saying that someone who wants to occupy the public right-of-way may need to get a permit to be able to do so. So what will outreach look like to properly inform residents of the new process?
Well, it's not a new process per se, so the citation privilege portion of it is. The actual 906 is, people do that now. So when you see the parades or the block parties and different things like that, they actually secure a 906 whenever they want to do something on the sidewalk in reference to the parade or the block party. So that actually is there right now. We've actually adjusted the website to make sure we could actually walk folks actually through it more easily. And then we've actually built some applications that allow folks to actually put in if they need to shut down a lane. So that's done automatically, so we get those alerts. So we've taken great strides in terms of actually doing that, but the practice in the 906 does not change.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So my last couple questions is how do departments, right? So this is a city code that other departments can potentially enforce. How do we control that internally? So how could this be used if the intention of this is not, and I want to be clear about this because this is what we heard from folks, the intention of this is not directed at unhoused people, which we know that there would be folks who might be in the right of way. The intention of this is as what Public Service clearly stated. Can you talk a little bit about how internally we have policies, we have procedures that folks would follow to then ensure that the original intention of this code is enforced?
Yes, I'll take that, and then Drew can add on. So any department that wants to enforce a section of code, usually that code is for one particular department, but that department or any other departments must have rules and regulations in place to put that code into action. So that is what we will continue to be doing, is finalizing those rules and regulations, and then that really gets into the details of how the program is run. And then those are adopted by the departments, and then let's say utilities wants to use that same section of code, because it's directed towards the right-of-way, they would need to work with us, create their own set of rules and regulations in coordination with us, hopefully, that would go along with that code. So each department would have to have their own rules and regulations about how they were going to enact.
So just to draw a finer point on that, how would we ensure that another department does not change the original interpretation or intention of what this city code, of what this piece of code does?
So Go ahead, Drew.
In public service, because it's right away, we're the keepers of, and the overseers of that 900 code. We have a few things that we actually do. We have strong collaboration. The other part of it is that whenever a permit comes in, we actually route it to 9 other sections within various departments within the city of Columbus purview. Those folks actually review those permits to ensure that if something that does not fall on our side falls on their side, we actually deal with it, and vice versa. So the constant collaboration in and around that, which is a really good thing that works out almost every week, these kind of things bubble up. But that's how we ensure, is that if it's a code that pertains to a particular department, we bring that particular department in and vice versa. So when the 900 code, we're the overseers of the 900 code, we're the ones that enforce it, they bring those back to us. And any gray areas we collaborate on.
And I believe that what we discussed is that because of this process around the code, that internally, Director, we would essentially outline what the policies and the procedures are, that would also be made public, so the public would know, all of the departments would know what the intention of the code is. It would outline how the code should be used and how it should be enforced. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. The rules and regulations are something that we push out to everybody, make sure everybody is aware. It'll be on our website. The new website has a nice feature right on the front that says permits. And so all that information will be right there.
Okay. Before I move to public speakers, do my colleagues have any other questions of the department? We can always come back. Great. Thank you, Assistant Director. Thank you, Director. So we do have 3 speakers on this particular topic, and if I mispronounce your name, I am so sorry, but please correct me when you come up. So I'm just going to do them in order, and then so y'all can be ready to come up. Rachel Wenning is first. Drew Batty, is that correct? Close enough. You'll tell me. Correct me when you get here. And then Emily Myers. And then for each of our speakers, you do have 3 minutes so we can make sure that everyone has adequate time to express their questions or comments. Hi, Ms. Wenning, welcome back to council.
Thank you. So I was listening to your discussion, obviously, just now, and I just made a couple notes that I'm going to refer to here. The representative here discussed the difference between commercial and non-commercial. Obviously, houseless individuals are a non-commercial purpose, so really the commercial part doesn't apply to what we're worried about here, but you know, the biggest reason that these changes were enacted is because of contractors doing, you know, improper things, kind of littering, changing the sidewalks when they shouldn't, which is very important, actually. I think those changes are great. We have too much of that on the Hilltop, and I think we'll be happy to see contractors held responsible. However, these changes apply to everyone, not just contractors. So you did discuss, you know, the difference between these entities, but homeless people living in tents obviously are non-commercial. They do fall into that category. And I think Councilmember Favor asked about notice of the changes. The representative said that the process here hasn't changed, but the definition of the right-of-way areas, I think, did change and were expanded to include bike paths and things of that nature. So obviously, people who were living next to a bike path before, which I know they do over by McKinley, but some of that area has been cleared. You know, obviously, changes to a website probably are not going to be accessed by people living in tents next to a bike path. So I think there has to be, you know, I mean, notice is not my concern here to begin with, frankly, but I don't think that notice is going to reach the people that it should reach. And I think the bottom line here is you're stating that the intention is not to target unhoused people. But frankly, the intent does not matter. When it comes down to what's going to be done, the intent in enacting it is not going to make a difference. There could be a change made now, which would 100% prevent unhoused people from being a victim of this statute. And rather than do that, what you're saying is that rules and regulations are going to be enacted at a later time. But I don't think emails between 9 people are really sufficient to, ensure that people aren't affected and kicked out of their homes without notice, which is really what could happen here. So I don't think anything has changed from, when I testified here 2 weeks ago. If the code is not going to be used against people living in tents as dwellings, why don't we change that in the ordinance? Why don't we just put it in there? If that's not the intent, it's very simple to just table it, make a simple change, and then, I think the delay is worth it. We're running a big risk if we don't make that change. So I would just ask that you table it and make that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, I'm going.
Thank you, Chair Barosa de Padilla. I just wanted to address one matter that was raised by the speaker, and that was the issue relating to the bikeway and whether or not that has been expanded. I will say I was involved in the drafting, and what actually occurred in this case is that a number of definitions that were located in other portions of the chapter were moved collaboratively into Chapter 900 into one definition section. And as part of that movement, we broke up the definition of bikeway into 3 distinct definitions of bike lane, bike route, and bikeway, but the definitions are the same. They were simply broken up into 3 different categories for purposes of the definition section.
Thank you, City Attorney. I want to move on to our next speaker, and then I'm going to come back for some further clarifications. So if we can have our next speaker. Thank you. Welcome to council. If you could introduce yourself, any organizations that you represent, and then again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Drew Batt. I'm here with Here to Serve. We represent unsheltered residents of Columbus on the far south side. So I do still have a similar concern that was mentioned before. I saw that the definition of structure was just removed. Previously, it did include tents and a really kind of vague description of structure. And now I do not see a new definition of structure. So I do feel that I'm fearful that by necessitating permits and failing to clearly and explicitly define the structures that would be subject to these permits, and the people as well, that this should be tabled until we can get language in there that clarifies this. We should have language in there that just kind of explicitly defines who this isn't targeting. If we're going to, say that's what the case is, then can we get some accountability for it? So I'd ask that this be tabled until we can see that written in there, things better defined, and to specifically address that we do not want this legislation to interfere with people who are under sheltered. They're residents of the city too, so I would really appreciate some clarification there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Barosa de Padilla. Just as we move the definition of bikeway around in order to put it into one inclusive Chapter 900 for definitions, we likewise did that with the definition of structure. So structure was previously or currently located at 906.01, and there's a definition. That full definition was just moved into 900.081.
If I could have our last speaker, Rachel Myers. I'm sorry, Emily Myers. I'm so sorry. And again, if you could introduce yourself, any organizations you represent, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Emily Myers, and I'm here with Here to Serve. I'm the founder. So like Drew said, we work with people who are unsheltered on the far south side of Columbus. So we work with people who are directly impacted by this type of legislation. There are multiple pieces to this that really are going to impact us, and frankly, we're here to say that it's impact over intent. If your intent is to go after contractors, like people have said before, you can clarify that very easily. So we are looking for that clarification that if this is really who this is the intended target, let's change it. Let's fix this. Let's make it to the people that you want to hold accountable. Because as we're in 2023, coming out of COVID, we have seen record evictions, which means we are seeing record numbers of people in tents that would be in potential public space right-of-ways under this definition. Now, the second piece to that would be if they were in these spaces and we wanted to protest, we're not allowed to disseminate information as previously told if that testimony is correct. Can I get verification on that real quick?
Repeat that one more time.
That the right-of-ways are not going to be a space where you can protest or hand out information. That would be
No.
non-commercial.
No, that's not what the, go ahead.
I'm sorry, the previous testimony from the department was indicating that you couldn't erect a structure for that purpose. It is not prohibiting free speech or exercise of free speech in the right-of-way.
It's just asking you get a permit. So if you were going to, let's say you were going to have a festival, if you were going to erect a structure like a tent, meaning for festivals, a grandstand,
Right.
et cetera,
Or
that for those things, you would need a permit.
Okay, or possibly a community event.
Yes.
So if you're looking to help people who are unsheltered and you don't want to go through traditional channels because they don't help, now you're not going to be able to. So this is, the impact here is greatly affecting people who advocate for people who are unsheltered and people who are unsheltered and in need of a public space to go. We've already started policing more of the parks in this capacity because we don't want unsheltered people to be there either. So now we can't criminalize our way out of this. This is not going to be helpful, and I'm here to say that it is 100% impact over intent. If you want to go after contractors, go after contractors, but do not make it vague to the point that anybody that we know can be affected. That's absolutely uncalled for, and people have to stand up against it. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I want to make a couple of points of clarification just on the points that we've heard from our speakers. So Director Gallagher, I'm going to come back to you. In a situation, and Attorney Morschbaker, sorry, I need more coffee before this meeting. When I also want some clarification from you. Actually, I'll start here. If there are unhoused folks in a right-of-way space, right? What is the remediation around that? And I'm going to head over to the Department of Development in just a second. But
So I'm going to defer to the department because the question is one of how we choose to respond, and that's more of a departmental
what is
question.
it? I'm sorry. Is it part of Columbus Code that we would remove people, or is that Ohio Revised Code, just for our own understanding of the public?
And again, it's a matter of the determination of how best to deal with the situation where there's an individual in the right-of-way that we believe may or may not be permitted to be there. I can tell you that the city code right now does require permission from the director in order to erect these structures, in the right-of-way. The only change that's been made in 906 is to make it clear that that's a permit that is required. Currently, it just states that it's the consent of the director. So that hasn't been a substantive change. It's more to make sure that it's clarified. As it states right now, the current provision of 90601 says a right-of-way permit issued pursuant to this chapter, ... But then when you go down to 90602, it indicates that any individual doing this shall obtain consent of the director. And so the clarification there, the language change there is to make sure that it's clear that that permit that was referenced in 96.01 is what you're seeking in 96.02 and nothing more. Now, the determination about how to address any particular violation within the right-of-way is a departmental determination that I would definitely defer to the departments.
Director Gallagher.
Yes, so anytime there would be an issue like that, anytime there has been an issue with that, we work closely with the Department of Development and work through their channels, and so I would pass it to the department to talk through what they currently do, because that's who we work with.
Thank you, Councilmember. For us, when there are encampments, our first priority is to ensure that outreach teams have an opportunity to work with individuals who are experiencing homelessness. So first and foremost, we're going to engage with Mount Carmel, Southeast, and our other lead entities who do this work every day to ensure that they have an opportunity to meet with the unhoused individuals and determine what type of services they require. If a remediation is deemed necessary, then once there has been ample opportunity for engagement, usually months at a time, we will provide notices of trespassing if it is on public property. We do not engage on private property. That states a time for the remediation. For our notices in consultation with the City Attorney's Office, we use the Ohio Revised Code. We do not utilize Title 900 at all. Those notices are given to each individual, and then we also post them on the property. After that has taken place, then it's usually 2 to 3 weeks for the actual remediation. So if there was a situation that involved a substantial encampment that we determined needed to be remediated in consultation with Public Service, CPD, and others, we would go through that process. So again, we do not initiate Title 900 as part of our process at all.
Do my colleagues have any additional questions? No? So I want to address, so first and foremost, I want to say thank you for the advocacy of all the folks who came down to council. I want to thank you not just for your advocacy today, but for your advocacy every day, for the organizations that you built, for the way that you're working with folks, for literally our most vulnerable folks in our community. It is never the intention of this council to cause harm. Never the intention. It is never the intention of this council to displace people. That is not the intention of this council. When looking at this particular piece of code and looking at the intention of the code and looking at the unintended consequences as we walk through each piece of this code is specifically addressing two issues. It is both holding commercial contractors accountable, and it is giving clearer definitions around non-commercial. This is the same code that we have had, the same code that we have been following, with clearer definitions for folks to understand that they need a permit and that they are not held criminally negligent or that there is not a criminal impact to whatever their actions are. And so our understanding of the code and the conversations that we've had, we believe around the policies and rules that we are putting in place, that this code will be used as intended. If at any time we feel like the code is not being used as intended, we can certainly bring it back to this body, and we can amend the code to ensure that there is clear definitions around what the intention is. I understand if there are folks who may not trust that. I understand there are folks that they may not believe that. And it is our belief, moving this forward, is my belief as a chair, that we will use the code as intended to hold folks accountable in the right-of-way spaces that we have. If there are other concerns that folks have, they are more than welcome to reach out to my office, and we will continue to have a dialogue. Do my colleagues have any other questions, comments? If not, I move for passage.
Second. Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you, Council President. I have my
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's 6:27. We'll go ahead.
That's
Just
not true.
joking. Go ahead.
I am so sorry. I apologize, Council President. There is one more piece that I have of legislation, and actually, this is another code change. So this is 2053, 2023. And again, this is part of the cleanup that we have done around our code changes. So this is to enact, amend, and repeal various sections of Chapter 219, Chapter 919, and Title 21 of the Columbus City Codes to improve operational efficiencies by updating the division's name to give the director of the ability to change rules and regulations related to shared mobility services and to establish a collection of correct vehicle information, mobility zone numbers, and any other information required to complete a parking transaction. This code officially changes the name of the division from Parking Services to Mobility and Parking. The division's primary duties include general transportation planning, efforts for parking, bicycle infrastructure analysis, traffic calming, and shared mobility. The recommendation changes to the city code are primarily housekeeping in nature, clarifying language, eliminating provisions or references that no longer apply, reflecting updating procedures and operations, and acknowledging the expanded responsibilities of the division related to mobility management in addition to parking management. A couple things to highlight is that this is helping us modernize the city code. For example, allowing citation appeals via email, allowing updates to requested information via the mobile app, and formalizing the ability of the director to establish rules for shared mobility devices like scooters. Additional changes include, in the past, Downtown Special Services supporting nonprofits organizations were provided waivers for reduced parking fees. Parking Services treats all special events with the same with a consistent fee structure at a significantly reduced rate. So the impacts and benefits, there's no significant impact from the proposed code changes. Overall, it provides more clarification to our impounding and paid parking process for citizens and acknowledges the expanded role of the division in managing mobility needs for our growing city. Director, did I cover everything? Is there anything else that you would like to add to the code change?
You did cover everything.
Great. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Second. Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed. Is there a motion to recess for zoning? Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Council's in recess.
41. Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Can I get a motion to dispense with the reading of the journal? Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, the journal is approved. We'll now go to the zoning committee. Councilmember Dorrance chairs that committee. All members serve on it. Councilmember, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President. Before we begin tonight's zoning agenda, allow me to briefly explain our current rules pertaining to speaking before council on rezonings and variances. We only hear a staff presentation for ordinances that have a disapproval from recommending body, or if we have a public speaker signed up to speak against an ordinance. All speakers in council variances, including city staff, area commissioners, applicants, and members of the public, will be sworn in before they give testimony. Representatives of an area commission and applicants are always able to speak on an ordinance. They do not need to fill out a speaker slip. We did receive 2 public speaker slips for tonight's meeting, but those at the time of this meeting have now been withdrawn. On the advice of the city staff, I will now swear in the city staff. Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, that you shall answer in the pains or penalty of perjury? If so, please say I do. Thank you. Please let the record reflect that Tim Dietrich from the Department of Building and Zoning Services and Dan Bleschmidt from the Department of Public Service have been sworn in. First, we have ordinance 2188-2023 to rezone 210 Winter Avenue, being 3.12 plus acres located in the northeast side of Hawthorne Avenue, Winter Avenue, from the ARLD Apartment Residential District and 1 Institutional District, CPD Commercial Plan Development District. The applicant is State of Ohio, FOB, the Ohio State University, care of Jeff Brown, attorney. Proposed use of the parking lot, City's Department recommendation approval. Development Commission recommendation approval. Nearest Area Commission's recommendations also approval. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments? Seeing I first move to amend as emergency.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Waive.
Thank you. I next move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2210-2023 to rezone 4300 Alcar Drive, being 6.38 plus acres located on the northeast side of Alcar Road, 400 plus feet west of Dearmorse Road, from R Rural District to LR1 Limited Apartment Residential District. Applicants Metro Development, LLC, care of Jeff Brown, attorney. Proposed use is a multi-unit residential development. City's Department recommendation is approval. Development Commission's recommendation is approval. Westland Area Commission's recommendation is also approval. Do I have my colleagues have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2215-2023 to rezone 5200 Winchester Pike, being 27.56 plus acres located on the north side of Winchester Pike, 1,650 plus feet east of Shannon Road, from R Rural District to LM Limited Manufacturing District. The applicant is Straight Real Estate and Arnold Lumber Investments 2 LLC, care of Thomas Hart, attorney. Proposed use of light manufacturing and lumberyard. City's Department recommendation is approval. Development Commission's recommendation is approval. Greater Southeast Area Commission's recommendation is also approval. Do my colleagues have questions or comments? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2183-2023 to grant a variance provisions of section 3332.037 R2F Residential District 3312.25 maneuvering, 3312.21 D1 landscaping and screening, 3321.05 B2 vision clearance, 3332.05 area district lot width requirements, 3332.14 R2F area district requirements, 3332.18 D base of computing area, 3332.19 fronting, 3332.21 building lines, 3332.25 maximum side yard required, 3332.26 minimum side yard permitted, 3332.27 rear yard, and 3332.28 E private garage at the Columbus City Codes for property located at 133 Thurman Avenue. Permit a non-accessory parking lot, vehicular access, and reduced development standards for a single unit dwelling in the R2 residential district. The applicant is Likens Company, care of Dave Perry, agent. Proposed use of a single unit residential development with non-accessory parking. City's Department recommendation is approval. German Village Commission recommendation is also approval. I first move to accept the entire staff report into evidence as an exhibit.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Accept it.
Thank you. I next move to adopt the findings of staff as the findings of council.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Adopt it.
Finally, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2203-2023 to grant a variance provisions of section 3332.039 R4 Residential District, 3312.13 driveway, 3312.25 maneuvering, 3312.29 parking spaces, 3312.49C minimum number of parking space required, 3332.05 area district lot width requirements, 3332.15 R4 area district requirements, 3332.18C base of computing area, 3332.21 building lines, 3332.25 maximum side yard required, 3332.26 maximum side yard permitted. Columbus City Codes for property located at 172-180 North Central Avenue, permit a mixed-use development, reduced development standards in the R4 residential district. The applicant is North Central Holdings, care of Dave Perry, agent. Proposed use is a mixed-use development. City Department's recommendation is approval. Franklin Area Commission's recommendation is also approval. I first move to accept the entire staff report into evidence as an exhibit.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Accept it.
Thank you. I next move to adopt the findings of staff as the findings of council.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Adopt it.
And finally, move for passage.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2211-2023 to grant a variance provisions of section 3333.18, building lines 333.255 perimeter yard, and 333.35G private garage at the Columbus City Codes of property located at 4300 Alcar Road. Permit reduced development standards for apartment complex in the LAR1 Limited Apartment Residential District. The applicant is Metro Development LLC, care of Jeffrey Brown, attorney. Proposed use a multi-unit residential development. City Department recommendation is approval. Westland Area Commission's recommendation is also approval. I first move to accept the entire staff report into evidence as an exhibit.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Accept it.
I next move to adopt the findings of staff as the findings of council.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Adopt it.
Thank you. I finally move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2216-2023 to grant a variance of provisions of section 3311.28B, more objectionable uses, 3312.272, parking setback line, 3312.43, required surface area for parking, 3321.01, dumpster area, 3363.24, building lines in an M manufacturing district, and 3363.41A, storage for property located at 5200 Winchester Pike to permit a reduced development standards for manufacturing use in the LM Limited Manufacturing District. The applicant is Straight Real Estate and Arnold Lumber Investments 2 LLC, care of Tom Hart, attorney. Proposed use is a light manufacturing lumber yard. City Department recommendation is approval. Greater Southeast Area Commission's recommendation is also approval. I first move to accept the entire staff report into evidence as an exhibit.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Accept it.
I next move to adopt the findings of staff as the findings of council.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Adopt it.
And finally, move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2217-2023 to grant a variance provisions of section 3332.035 R3 Residential District, 3312.49C, minimum number of parking spaces required of the Columbus City Codes for property located at 803 Barnett Road. Permit a non-assembly catering service business with a reduction in the minimum number of parking spaces required in the R3 Residential District. The applicant is Felina Poindexter. Proposed use of catering service. City's Department recommendation is approval. Mid-East Area Commission's recommendation is also approval. I first move to accept the entire staff report into evidence as an exhibit.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Accept it.
I next move to adopt the findings of staff as the findings of council.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Adopt it.
And finally, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2218-2023 to grant a variance provisions of section 3333.02 AR12, ARLD, AR1 apartment residential district use of the Columbus City Codes for property located at 1291 Oak Street to permit commercial office uses in the ARLD apartment residential district. The applicant is Michael Zaller. Proposed use of a commercial office. City's Department recommendation is approval. Near East Area Commission recommendation is also approval. I first move to accept the entire staff report into evidence as an exhibit.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Accept it.
Thank you. I next move to adopt the findings of staff as the findings of council.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Adopt it.
And finally, move for passage.
Second.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy. President Harden.
Pass.
Next, we have ordinance 2221-2023 to grant a variance provisions of section 3363.01 manufacturing districts of the Columbus City Code, so property located at 1728 Maryland Avenue, permit a multi-unit residential development in the M manufacturing district. The applicant is Central Ohio Opportunity Fund, LLC, care of Sean Mennel, attorney. Proposed use a multi-unit residential development. City's Department recommendation is approval. The Near East Area Commission's recommendation is also approval. I first move to accept the entire staff report into evidence as an exhibit by voice.
Clerk, please call the row by voice.
Bangston, I'm sorry. Did you say by voice?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bangston? Yes. Ms. Barosa de Padilla? Mr. Brown? Yes. Mr. Dorans?
Yes.
Ms. Favor?
Abstain.
Mr. Remy?
Yes.
President Harden.
Yes. Or accept it.
Thank you. I next move to adopt the findings of staff as the findings of council by voice.
Clerk, please call the row by voice.
Mr. Bangston? Yes. Ms. Barosa de Padilla? Mr. Brown? Yes. Mr. Dorans?
Yes.
Ms. Favor?
Abstain.
Mr. Remy?
Yes.
President Harden.
Yes. Adopt it.
Thank you. And finally, I move for passage by voice.
Clerk, please call the row.
Mr. Bangston? Yes. Ms. Barosa de Padilla? Yes. Mr. Brown? Yes. Mr. Dorans?
Yes.
Ms. Favor?
Abstain.
Mr. Remy?
Yes.
President Harden.
Yes.
Thank you, Council President. That's all we have tonight in zoning.
Thank you, sir. Is there a motion to adjourn? Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Pass. We will reconvene in 5 minutes.
Meeting number 40. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Meeting is reconvened. The next committee to come before council is the Recreation and Parks Committee. That committee is chaired by Councilmember Brown. Councilmember, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I moved my microphone around because Mike said there's problems with it, but you got to understand, Dorns mess with my microphone. That's why. Thank you, Council President. This evening, I have in Rec and Parks, I have ordinance 2097 to authorize the Director of the Department of Recreation and Parks to enter into a contract with GTC for the HVAC equipment upgrades for 2020-2022. Project and authorize the transfer of $3,976,500 within the Recreation and Parks Voter Bond Fund to authorize the amendment of the 2023 capital improvements budget and to authorize the expenditure of $3,976,500 from the Recreation and Parks Voter Bond Fund. This ordinance supports key HVAC equipment upgrades needed for several of our city's recreation centers. The upgrades will include replacing air handlers, boilers, condensers, furnace units, fans, ductwork, and associated systems that are identified as failure and/or in poor condition. Director Reese is here this evening, but she's having problems with her throat, so unless there are any questions from my colleagues, I will do my best to answer them. If there are no questions, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Next, I have ordinance 2124-2023 to authorize the appropriation of $1,797,205 within the GDBCG fund in accordance with the 2020 amended annual action plan to authorize an expenditure correction of $1,797,205 from the Recreation and Parks Voted Bond Fund for the CDBG fund for the Glenwood and Windsor Pool Replacements Project and to declare an emergency. This ordinance authorizes the appropriation of $1,797,205 in the Community Development Block Grant Fund 2248 to be applied towards the cost of the Glenwood and Windsor Pool Replacement Project via an expenditure correction. Emergency action is being requested as the funding sources needed to be corrected to meet the timelines and goals associated with the CDBG funding. At this particular time, I'd also like to thank Director Reese for the work that they've done diligently with regards to addressing the issues regarding replacement and repair work for our pools. If there are no questions, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
I have one other ordinance in Recreation Parks. May I ask, turn to page 11 for ordinance 1552-2023 in the consent agenda to authorize the Director of Recreation and Parks to enter into a nonprofit grant agreement with Gladden Community House in support of summer programming to youth, to authorize an appropriation within the Recreation and Parks Operating and Extension Fund, to authorize the expenditure of $50,000 from the Recreation and Parks Operating Fund. I move to amend and submit it to the clerk by voice.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bangston.
Abstain.
Ms. Barosa de Padilla.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Dorans. Ms. Faber. Mr. Remy.
Yes.
President Harden.
Yes. Ordinance is passed.
Thank you. Council President, may I move to education, please, sir?
Please.
Thank you.
Just joking. So that was just an amendment, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
that was an amendment. Now I move for passage, and I ask for a voice vote.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll by voice.
Mr. Bangston. Ms. Barosa de Padilla.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes?
Mr. Dorans. Ms. Faber. Mr. Remy. President Harden.
Yes, ordinance is passed.
Thank you. Can I now move to education, sir?
Please.
Thank you. We're okay?
We're good.
Let's see, education, ordinance 1931-2023 to authorize and direct the executive director of the Mayor's Office of Education to enter into contracts with high-quality pre-kindergarten organizations selected via competitive application process to provide educational services and to authorize the expenditure not to exceed $5,931,325 from the general fund. The purpose of the Early Start Columbus is to expand high-quality pre-K education pre-kindergarten education services through our partnerships with Columbus City Schools and community-based providers. The providers partnering in the Early Start Columbus program have all demonstrated the ability to provide high-quality pre-kindergarten education. All partners are providing are rated at least 3 stars in the state's Step Up to Quality Rating and Improvement System, and were chosen from competitive application process. Director Smido is here from Education. Would you speak to this legislation, sir?
Chair Brown, President Harden, members of council, thank you for your consideration of this ordinance. This is our big Early Start Columbus program. We do select the providers competitively. We communicate with all licensed early learning providers in Franklin County. We invite them to send us a letter of an intent to apply. Of those, we look for the ones who meet our sorry, thank you. Our quality requirements, and we invite them to apply for funding. And of those, again, we narrow that down to, we get to our quality requirements, and those providers we do end up partnering with for this. And we try to expand the number of providers we partner with every year.
If there are no questions from my colleagues, I move for passage by voice vote.
Clerk, please call the roll by voice.
Mr. Bangston? Ms. Barosa de Padilla?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Dorans? Ms. Favor? Mr. Remy? President Harden?
Yes.
Also have ordinance 2148-2023. It's the final ordinance in education. If you turn to page 5 for 2148-2023, to authorize the Director of the Office of Education to enter into a contract with the Crane Center for Early Childhood Research and Policy at The Ohio State University to implement Ready for Success, a screening and improvement strategy, and a Read It Again math, and to provide mid-year student assessment, and to authorize the expenditure of $491,000 from the general fund. So the support of the Office of Education, the Crane Center for Early Childhood Research and Policy at The Ohio State University will administer their Ready for Success program that uses a multi-pronged strategy to support providers in preparing children for kindergarten success. Again, Director Smido.
Chair Brown, President Harden, members of council, thank you again for considering this. This will allow us, by waiving second reading, this will allow us to make sure we can do our pre-assessment at the beginning of the school year, so that we can get in both our pre and our post-assessment and see how well our kids do in the program.
Thank you. If there are no questions from my colleagues, I move to waive second reading by voice.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bangston? Yes. Ms. Barosa de Padilla?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Dorans? Yes. Ms. Favor? Mr. Remy? Yes. President Harden?
Yes, waived.
I move for passage by voice.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bangston? Yes. Ms. Barosa de Padilla?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Dorans? Yes. Ms. Favor? Mr. Remy? Yes. President Harden?
Yes.
That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Next committee to come before council is the Public Utilities Committee, chaired by President Pro Tem. President Pro Tem, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President. Tonight in Public Utilities, we have Ordinance 1880-2023 to authorize the Director of Public Utilities to enter a service agreement in accordance with the relevant provisions of Chapter 329 of the Columbus City Codes pertaining to waiver of competitive bidding with the Ohio State Office of Sponsored Programs, the NPES Stormwater and Clintonville Blueprint Monitoring Project for the Division of Sewerage and Drainage, Stormwater and Regulatory Management Section, and authorize the expenditure of $275,000 from the Storm Sewer Operating Fund. The city is required to monitor discharges from its municipal separate storm systems during wet weather events. Wet weather monitoring will be performed at stormwater outfills characterized to change in quality and quantity of discharges from outfalls in the Clintonville Blueprint area after installation of this green infrastructure. Simulated stormwater events will be used to quantify changes on stormwater quality and quantity from the selected green infrastructure practices, and to evaluate changes in other selected social and economic indicators, and to evaluate the effect of this infrastructure on habitat and biodiversity within the planning area. Do my colleagues have questions or comments? Seeing none, I would first move to waive second reading by voice.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bangston? Yes. Ms. Barosa de Padilla?
Yes.
Mr. Brown? Yes. Mr. Dorans?
Yes.
Ms. Favor? Abstain. Mr. Remy? Yes. President Harden?
Yes.
Next, I move for passage by voice.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bangston? Yes. Ms. Barosa de Padilla? Yes. Mr. Brown? Mr. Dorans?
Yes.
Ms. Favor? Mr. Remy? President Harden.
Yes, ordinance is passed.
Thank you. Council President, may I move on to Workforce Development Committee?
Please.
Thank you. On Workforce Development, we have ordinance 2276-2023 to authorize city clerk to enter into a contract with Wentz, McHenry, Pfeiffer, and Petroff LLC for legal and educational services in support of the Community Benefits Advisory Committee to authorize an appropriation of expenditure of $20,000 from the Job Growth Subfund. This vendor will participate in preparing a guide explaining the purpose of community benefit agreements, how the agreements work, and how the agreements benefit workers, contractors, communities, and the city of Columbus. In addition to complementing and supporting the work of the Community Benefit Advisory Committee, the guide's purpose is congruent with the work of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and may be utilized by that office and certainly other offices working on these issues within the city of Columbus. The vendor was selected based upon their overwhelming qualifications, given their experience in the area of labor law and the familiarity with how to build constructive, productive, and effective community benefit agreements in which the city has been engaged in. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. And Council President, may I move on to rules and reference?
Please.
Thank you. Rules and reference, I have ordinance 1871-2023 to repeal and amend sections in Title 33 of the Columbus City Codes entitled Zoning Code in order to update and modernize terms, correct typographical mistakes, to clarify that automobile maintenance and repairs allowable use in the M1 and M2 manufacturing zoning districts, and to allow 1 and 2 unit dwellings in apartment residential zoning districts. Many in our community are aware the city is pursuing a comprehensive update of our zoning code in order to help support the growth that Columbus is experiencing. This legislation before council is not that comprehensive update. We're still in the midst of public engagement through the Department of Development and Department of Building and Zoning Services on that effort. To learn more about where we're at and become engaged in that issue, you're welcome to check out the Zoning Initiative website. However, the legislation before us tonight is an effort to modernize some specific code language, again, correct some typographical errors, and address specific land use regulations in order to efficiently regulate changing land use patterns and development patterns. It is necessary to update various code sections in Title 33 of our zoning code. This ordinance, in addition to correcting some of these typographical mistakes and updating terms and nomenclature, will also make some minor regulatory changes. The proposed code changes will allow a single and 2 unit dwellings in apartment residential zoning districts where apartment complexes are already allowed, as well as adjusting the frontage requirement and eliminating the need for variances when multi-unit residential developments cross parcel lines with differing tax districts that cannot be combined. One of the keys here, this will allow more housing options permitted in a multifamily development by right without having to come before council for a specific variance. This will allow, again, if the apartment building is being constructed, for example, townhomes could be constructed on that same property at the same time without needing an additional variance. The code changes will also permit automobile maintenance repair uses in the M1 and M2 manufacturing districts where heavy truck/bus service garages and repair fleet vehicles are already allowed. Again, this change will allow more uses by right within these zoning districts, eliminating the need for a council variance in which we normally grant anyways. Additionally, the proposed language will permit wall graphics on the primary frontage of a building, even if the commonly used public interest may be located somewhere else in the building. This ordinance also recognizes other code provisions to achieve more efficient administration of the code without substantively changing those regulations. A public hearing was held before the Columbus Development Commission on June 8, 2023, and the Columbus Graphics Commission at their June 20th, 2023 meeting. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments on this legislation? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, I have ordinance 1872-2023 to repeal and replace sections in Chapter 3312, off-street parking and loading of the Columbus City Codes in order to update and modernize the minimum number of parking and loading spaces required by code, and to update overall street parking and loading space regulations. The code changes contained in this ordinance will update and continue to modernize the zoning code regulations regarding off-street parking and loading by adding code language to better contend with existing situations where parcels cannot be combined due to differing taxing districts. This code change also adds language related to prohibited parking and clarifies the requirement for stacking spaces pedestrian circulation routes, parking in a driveway, landscaping and screening. Additionally, this code changes address parking for office use in the Short North Special Parking Area. Further minor adjustments are made to the minimum number of required off-street parking spaces for specified uses, while the list of specified uses is added for clarity. Finally, these code changes streamline the requirement for bicycle parking by removing the design standards that were already regulated by the Department of Public Service. Overall, these code changes will make regulating, applying, and enforcing the provisions of our zoning code as it relates to off-street parking and loading easier, more efficient, and also ensure a more consistent approach for all in the city. A public hearing was held before the Columbus Development Commission on June 8th, 2023, and presentation at the Victorian Village Commission, Short North Alliance, and Italian Village Commission were also made earlier this summer. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you, Council President. All I have my committees this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next committee to come before council is Housing. We're calling tonight Housing for All Monday, and thanks to the chair and her leadership. Councilmember, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President Harden. Tonight in Housing, we have ordinance 2011-2023 to amend ordinance number 3296-2022 to authorize the additional expenditure of $1,250,000 to Columbus Housing Partnership for the Easton Place Homes Phase 2 development, to amend the 2023 capital improvement budget, to authorize the city auditor to transfer funds within the Affordable Housing Bond Fund, to authorize a third amendment to the bond-funded grant agreement, to authorize the filing of a restrictive covenant on the project, to authorize the assignment of some or all duties and responsibilities under the bond-funded grant agreement to the project owner, and to declare an emergency. The Easton Place Homes project is a total commitment of $6 million from the city and results in 200 affordable units at 30 to 60% of the area median income. Phase 2 will produce 100 affordable units and will offer a mix of 24 one-bedroom, 59 two-bedroom, and 17 three-bedroom apartments. Depending on final utility allowances, net rents for the different unit sizes are estimated at $360 to $830 for one bedroom, $430 to $995 for two bedrooms, and $485 to $1,135 for three-bedroom apartments. In addition to the city's capital funds, Phase 2 has also secured 4% tax credits from OFA in 2021, along with OFA, HDAP, and county home funds and other private loans. According to a recent report by the BIA of the Central Ohio, we should be building 14,000 to 19,000 homes each year. Currently, we are building about 8,000 to 9,000 homes annually, and that is less than half of what is needed. Unless home construction rises, housing will only cost more, pricing people out of their communities and neighborhoods. Home prices have already risen far faster than household income in Greater Columbus. The BIA study found that while Central Ohio home prices have risen about 10% a year, over the past 5 years, incomes have only risen 2% to 3% a year. To families struggling, the shortage of affordable homes isn't a headline, it's an everyday reality. And as we continue to talk about the need for housing units, affordable units are imperative. Just to level set, 30% of the area median income is $20,000 for one person and $29,000 for a family of four. And 60% of the area median income for an individual is $39,000, which is comparable to a customer service representative in Central Ohio. And for a family of four, 60% of the area median income is about $56,000, which is comparable to an electrician in Central Ohio. We continue to invest in housing units at all price points because the bottom line is we need to start building more housing units to avoid this housing crisis. I want to thank the Department of Development and Home for your work on this partnership and bringing needed affordable units to the city of Columbus. Director, Deputy Hannah Jones, do you have any additional comments you'd like to make at this time? Seeing none, do my colleagues have any questions or concerns? I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
We're going to hop around a little bit. May I move to rules and reference?
Please.
In rules and reference, we have ordinances 2108 and 2109. Over the past 2 decades, the Columbus region has enjoyed population and economic growth. From 2000 to 2021, the Columbus region's population increased by a third, adding more than 500,000 people and becoming the fastest growing metropolitan statistical area in the Midwest. However, this growth has come at a cost. specifically by outpacing the region's supply of available housing. Home and rental prices have soared as stock has been depleted, making home ownership and sometimes even having a roof over one's head increasingly out of reach for many people, particularly those from historically marginalized communities. In 2021, as chair of Council's Housing Committee, I championed the Housing for All legislative package, 3 policies that strengthen renter protections. But that was just the beginning of our work. We named it Housing for All because at Columbus City Council, we believe housing is a human right, period. The concept of housing as a human right is rooted in the belief that every individual deserves a safe, secure, and dignified place to live. It implies that governments and societies have an obligation to ensure that everyone has access to affordable, habitable, and secure housing. This includes protecting individuals from arbitrary evictions, preventing homelessness, and addressing housing discrimination. To continue this work, earlier this year, in March, City Council announced our 2023 housing initiatives, a 12-point policy legislative package that seeks to invest in our city through sustainable development of new affordable housing units, preserve our current housing stock, and ensure the housing market is inclusive of all people, regardless of socioeconomic status. These initiatives represent a team effort at City Council to address the problems within our community. Each council member has worked together to craft this package. Tonight, we will vote on 5 of the 12 outlined housing policies. While we know there is no silver bullet and these 5 policies alone will not solve our housing crisis, these are crucial steps towards addressing it. Part of this outlined housing plan was intentionally around stakeholder and community engagement. My team alone has had over 8 meetings with different folks over the last few months, and we are confident in the policies you will hear tonight. With that, we have Ordinance 2108-2023 to amend Chapters 4501 and 4551 of the Columbus City Codes to ensure that no operator shall refuse to accept tender on behalf of a tenant on the basis that the tender was proffered by a person other than the tenant. This legislation, often referred to as third-party payment, requires landlords to accept payment on behalf of a tenant if the tenant is not in breach or default of their rental agreement. For example, if a third-party rental assistance provider has secured rental assistance for the tenant and that tenant is not in breach of their contract, meaning they are not past their due date, the landlord is required to accept payment. Historically, some landlords have not accepted third-party payments, using that as a pretext for getting rid of some tenants. This is simply not acceptable. This legislation protects tenants by making it easier for them to get caught up in ensuring that they are able to stay in their homes. There are currently millions of dollars in rental and utility assistance funds available for qualifying residential occupants and owners who have experienced a financial hardship. Amending the city code to require operators to accept tender on behalf of a tenant and remain housed would benefit the city of Columbus by allowing the occupants to remain in a safe and sanitary housing and benefit landlords by ensuring they are made whole. Are there any questions or comments by my colleagues? Yes, Councilmember Remy.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Faber. I just want to thank you for your work on this legislation. Important to offer this backstop for people that might be in need, and I just appreciate the partnership as we worked through some concerns with the Columbus Realtors and know we're at a point that really makes sense. And my commitment was that I would watch and work alongside you, and we'll study the data, because when we think about this type of legislation, it's really for a very last resort, and one that we need to make sure that we have the supportive programming so that we ultimately don't get to this point. And so I've said this many, many times, that if there is somebody getting to this point and we don't have a program out there, we need to know about it. Because we will either find organizations that can create that type of program, or we will try to change the system. So very important work today, as we know, if we're not building more, we got to continually say this, if we're not building more, if we don't have housing champions, we cannot, people are coming to the city of Columbus no matter what. They are coming, and whether we have housing enough to fit those people or not is is really why we have such lack of inventory today and why our costs are skyrocketing. So unless we start promoting more building and that sort of thing, people are going to be hurting and they're going to face situations like this. So I'm very happy to be supportive this evening, and thank you for your work on this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Remy. With that, I'd move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2109, that's 2023, to amend Chapter 4551 of the Columbus City Codes to ensure that occupants in residential rental properties are afforded the right to assert tender of rent as an affirmative defense to an eviction filed on the basis of non-payment of rent. Access to housing provides stability, security, and a foundation for personal growth. It allows families to thrive, children to succeed in their education, and communities to flourish. Earlier this year, the Community Shelter Board shared our community's most recent numbers of homeless individuals. Unfortunately, our community experienced an increase of 22% across the board. We must act to ensure we support our most vulnerable residents in staying in their homes. Ohio is one of only 5 states that allows landlords to evict a tenant if a tenant pays rent just 1 day late or $1 short. Given the many negative consequences to evicted tenants and the impact on public services, this ordinance would give tenants a reasonable chance to pay their rent and remain in their homes. This legislation, often referred to as pay to stay, would standardize an existing defense to an eviction action by allowing tenants to pay everything that is owed to avoid eviction. By allowing residents to pay their rent and all late fees up until a court judgment, we are ensuring that folks on the verge of a crisis do not lose their homes due to a tough time. It is in the best interest of all parties to an eviction action that occupants are afforded the right to assert payment of rent as an affirmative defense to an eviction action filed on the basis of non-payment of rent. Current codes does not require an operator to enter into pay-to-stay agreements. Again, there are currently millions of dollars in rental and utility assistance funds available for qualifying residential occupants and owners who have experienced financial hardship. We encourage residents to use these if you are experiencing a hardship and need help paying your rent or utilities. You can visit rentful614.com for additional information. Amending the city code to allow occupants the right to assert payment and remain housed would benefit the city of Columbus by allowing the occupants to remain in a safe and sanitary housing. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? We do have 3 speakers on the agenda. All right. Now it's my honor to introduce Shannon Isom, the President and CEO of the Community Shelter Board. Welcome back to Council.
Thank you for having me. Shannon Isom, President and CEO of the Community Shelter Board. President Harding, as well as the gentlemen and women leaders of the City Council, I thank you for being able to speak on behalf of this legislation. Thank you. One is just note that 14 other Ohio jurisdictions have put this forward, and as early as 2020 in Toledo. We would expand this protection for 20% of the Ohio population. Not enough, but yet still in the right direction. This protection codifies and standardizes an existing common law defense that we use, we see it for eviction, but it also allows tenants to make the landlord whole by tendering rent and fees. It offers protection by essentially preventing displacement. It also provides predictability and efficacy to the ERA program. It deters abuse and the eviction process, but more than anything, it neutralizes the commodification of housing. CSB, Community Shelter Board, consistently relies on strategies. It is imperative that we have coordinated response. This is a diversion response that we know is effective and is reliable. Likewise, it offers tenant protection of uniformity, of standardization, and this is an equity issue. The housing stock, it keeps it diverse by keeping it stable. And we know that the more stability we have, actually, the more diversity that we will see in communities. And finally, reciprocity. Thank you for Councilwoman Favor to consider the reciprocity that not only are we protecting tenants, but we're protecting the operator, which is also important to do. Forced homelessness has to stop. I will end on this. We know that this continues to be an eviction process, and the evictions are higher than we've ever seen before. But more than anything, these 7 years, this disproportionate 7 years of burden is affected more by women, by the poor, by the brown, and by the Black. And for that, CSB stands as a proponent of this. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Isom? Thank you for your testimony this evening. Next, we have Carly Buse, Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio. And I want to take a moment before she reaches the podium to extend so much gratitude, because one of the reasons why we're even having this conversation this evening is the advocacy of the Affordable Housing Alliance, specifically as it relates to pay to stay, probably for the last 2 years. You have been advocating on behalf of the City of Columbus to move in this direction. And so we appreciate the work that you and the organization has done to get us to this place today.
We are beyond proud of the collaboration and the really thoughtful dialogue that's gone into getting us to this place tonight. So we return that thanks. And thank you, Chair and President and members of Council, for allowing me to speak this evening in support of the Pay to Stay ordinance. You have heard overwhelming public comment on this issue, so I'll try and cut to the quick and try to follow Shannon, which is incredibly challenging to do. I will note just a few key facts that I think have informed our position on the ordinance. The first is that evictions are at an all-time high, and they are only getting higher. We are up 36% over 2019, when we thought we were in a crisis phase and we had no idea what was coming and how much worse it was going to get. And those thousands and thousands of households that are facing eviction now represent thousands of families who don't know where their kids are going to start school in a few weeks. And those ramifications are going to be pervasive if we don't take every opportunity we have to get ahead of it, as we are doing this evening. The second fact is that Ohio as a state has not kept up with our housing needs. As you noted, we are one of only 5 states where we have this rule that allows a one-day, $1 penalty. Examples of how this loophole can be abused, although it is not frequent, are astonishing. You could fall and trip on your way to pay rent and be hospitalized and be evicted with no statutory right to cure because you were not able to make it to the management office that day. The third observation is that this right to tender is by no means unique to the landlord-tenant relationship, but rather it is a common protection in both housing and consumer transactions throughout the state. Homeowners have long had a right to redeem a breached mortgage. Taxpayers have a right to cure delinquent property taxes. Car purchasers have a right to cure a defaulted auto loan. Even businesses often have a right to cure a supplier contract. After adopting all of these protections in the past, the lending system did not incur a spike, unpaid property taxes did not increase, and suppliers did not raise property taxes, or consumer costs. The fourth note I want to make is that these pay-to-stay protections are a measured response to Columbus's housing challenge. As we've discussed before, they do not alter the terms of any lease agreement. They do not alter centuries of common law, which dictates that equity abhors a forfeiture. They do not, sorry to flash back some of you to law school. Equity abhors a forfeiture is pretty technical language. But they do not alter the tenant's obligation to pay full rent to the landlord and make that property owner whole. And they do not alter the daily practices of the vast majority of landlords who accept rent when it is tendered to them. All this does is, as you note, standardizes and codifies an existing common law defense to eviction, making our current legal system more predictable and more fair. And as you also noted, we will become the 15th city to adopt this protection throughout the state of Ohio. After tonight, it is likely that this will cover 1 in 5 households statewide, a higher proportion of tenants than that. And as a result of following these other peer cities, we have not seen any negative consequence. We have not seen any increase in rent. We have not seen any increase to operator costs. I just want to conclude by thanking you for your time, thanking for your consideration of pay to stay, as well as for the breadth and the depth of the affordable housing measures you have on your agenda tonight. It's because of evenings like this that I am more confident than ever we will be the first city to both grow equitably and prosperously. So thank you. I'm happy to answer questions if I may.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Booz at this time? Thank you for your continued advocacy. And last but certainly not least, we have Lusanne Green and Ophelia Arnold with the NAACP Columbus chapter. I also like to acknowledge President of the NAACP Columbus chapter, Ms. Nana Watson, as well, is in chambers with us this evening. Welcome to council.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. I would like to first thank Councilmember Favors and the City Council for welcoming the NAACP Housing Committee in to give our testimony. We are tonight to share our support for Councilmember Favors' housing initiative. We look at the current conditions of housing in Franklin County and across the country, we are experiencing a housing crisis. Families are losing their homes, and the rate of people experiencing homelessness is increasing, and HUD funding and programming have been cut. The housing initiative being proposed tonight are one of many steps needed to address the housing needs for our families in the community. We look forward to providing feedback and working alongside Councilmember Favors in order to eradicate housing instability in Franklin County. I thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Are there questions for? Thank you.
Thank you.
I also would like to take this opportunity to extend appreciation to the Columbus Realtors, the Apartment Association, our landlords who were not affiliated with either of the organizations for their time and the level of engagement. I wholeheartedly believe that the legislation is stronger today because the way in which we have had a high-level conversation about not only the intent, but the impact of the legislation as well. So I just want to make sure I acknowledge that. And then also, to a point that Councilmember Remy made earlier today, we truly see third-party payment and pay-to-stay almost as a package to ensure that not only can our residents stay safely housed, but that our landlord community can continue to be made whole. And the reality is that at this point in time, because of Columbus's good stewardship of emergency rental assistance dollars, there are millions of dollars that are available to continue to help residents who are experiencing financial hardship. These legislations are stopgap measures. Pay to stay is the last-ditch effort, and so you should not even have to get to that point because there are dollars and resources available to support you. So once again, please visit rentful614.com for additional information if you need help paying your rent or your utilities. Are there any questions or comments by my colleagues? Seeing none, I'd move for passage.
Second. Clerk, please call the roll.
I'm sorry. Oh. I now amend. Oh, I do. I apologize. I would first move to amend as submitted.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Amended.
And now I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. May I move back to housing?
Please.
Thank you. Back in the Housing Committee, we have ordinances 2177-2023 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to execute grant agreements with numerous not-for-profit social service agencies in an amount up to $4,396,924.32 of the U.S. Department of Treasury Emergency Rental Assistance 2 funds to eligible recipients as part of the department's ERA2 strategy, to authorize an agreement start date of August 1st, 2023, to authorize the payment of eligible expenses through September 30th, 2025, to authorize the advancement of funds on a predetermined schedule during the term of the agreement, to authorize the expenditure of up to $4,396,924.32 from the Emergency Rental Assistance 2 Fund and to declare an emergency, Since 2021, when the federal government launched the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the city and our many housing partners have done significant work to get over $60 million in emergency rental assistance out to residents, which has provided an estimated 11,000 households with rent and/or utility assistance. Earlier this year, because of the city of Columbus was successful in getting the money out, we received an additional $68 million in reallocated emergency rental assistance dollars. These funds are imperative in keeping families housed and safe. The city has seen historic rise in eviction filings and housing instability. This ordinance will allow the departments to contract with 27 housing resource specialists that will form a collaborative within the Central Ohio Stable Housing Network to collaborate resources and assistance among nonprofit organizations within Franklin County. These specialists will help facilitate services that will aid tenants who are in a housing crisis with assessing resources as well as a housing problem-solving skills. The housing resource specialists will assist tenants in applying for rental and utility assistance that targets at-risk and vulnerable populations facing eviction, housing instability, and homelessness. The awards are given with an anticipated renewal in fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025, pending availability of funds and program performance per agreements with each agency. The department shall submit under separate legislation pieces of legislation for additional grant agreements for the same purpose. We have been on a learning journey as we work to get through the first round of ERA dollars, and we will be the first to say this was not without hiccups. Since then, the Department of Development has been working hard with partner agencies to understand and create a strategy for the best way to get funds out quickly and efficiently, resulting in landlords receiving the funds earlier and residents to stay housed. Thank you to Director Stevens, Deputy Director Jones, and the entire team for all their hard work on this. Director Jones, do you have anything you'd like to add at this time?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Favor. Good evening, President Harden, President Pro Tem Dorans, Chair Favor, and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. The goal of the Stable Housing Initiative is not only to stop evictions from happening, but to prevent them from being filed in the first place. In order to achieve this, we recognize that it is imperative that assistance payments are processed and issued in a timely manner. Building upon a pilot that the department developed with the Columbus Apartment Association, we have centralized the application intake and payment disbursement process, removing the administrative burden from the 25 different partner organizations who are participating. This allows them to focus on what they do best, engage with their clients, and reach our most vulnerable populations who continue to face housing instability. This process gives landlords and property management companies a single point of contact for issues related to applications and payments, and ensures that regardless of which not-for-profit organization the tenant is working with, the procedures used are consistent. We started a soft launch of the new streamlined ERA program on July 12th. Since that time, we now have 25 organizations doing intake across the entire Columbus MSA. As of today, we've received 613 applications. 174 have been processed to date for over $770,000 in payments. From the time of a complete application is submitted, it takes 10 to 14 days to issue a payment. From the time a landlord approves the application, which is the final step in the process and where we currently see the most delay, it only takes 2 to 5 days to issue a payment. The legislation before you this evening builds further on this process, embedding housing resource specialists with our partner agencies in order to ensure that we are providing the rental assistance and we're engaging with those families who are experiencing the housing crisis to ensure that they are able to identify housing units and receive the wraparound services to reach housing stability. You highlighted the website where all of the information can be found, and as soon as we have the staff hired in each of these partner organizations, that information will also be on the website, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions or comments by my colleagues for the department? Thank you. Seeing none, I move for passage.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2089-2023 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a not-for-profit service agreement with the Legal Aid Society of Columbus in an amount up to $1.5 million in support of the Tenant Advocacy Project to provide legal representation to residents facing an eviction, to authorize an appropriation and an expenditure within the Public Safety Initiative Subfund, and to declare an emergency. Studies show that tenants with legal representation are much more likely to avoid an eviction judgment and keep possession of their homes than unrepresented tenants. In addition to these primary effects, a right to counsel offers several secondary benefits to defendants who are sued for eviction. Attorneys may be able to keep eviction filings off tenants' records, arrange for alternative housing, negotiate reasonable amounts of time for tenants to move out, reduce or eliminate money owed to the landlord, or help tenants apply for rental assistance. Last year, City Council legislated $1.5 million to the Legal Aid Society of Columbus to staff additional TAP attorneys at eviction court, allowing them to serve more tenants. This additional $1.5 million will allow them to continue their work. Because the Tenant Advocacy Project attorneys specialize in these services, this cannot be provided by existing city employees. According to the data, 2,144 people were evicted in Franklin County Municipal Court in June, up to 1,992 in May, and 1,600 in June of 2022. There are resources such as emergency rental assistance dollars, or tenants may be evicted illegally, but without legal representation, they are more likely to lose their case, lose their home, and have an eviction on the record that will follow them, making their chances at obtaining housing even more difficult. This legislation aims at breaking that cycle and leveling the playing field. I would now like to ask Melissa Benson with Legal Aid. Thank you for your continued advocacy and work on behalf of residents in Columbus.
Good evening. President Hardin, Chair Favor, and the rest of council, thank you for inviting me here to speak tonight on behalf of the Legal Aid Society of Columbus. My name is Melissa Benson, and I am the Senior Managing Attorney of the Housing Practice Group at Legal Aid. I've been a housing attorney at Legal Aid since 2015, and when I began there, I was one of 4 attorneys working on housing issues, and we were only able to provide representation for a limited number of subsidized tenants in eviction court. Today, thanks in no small part to the support of the City of Columbus and our continued partnership, we have more than 20 attorneys working on landlord-tenant matters, a social worker, several paralegals, and a support staff person. In 2022, there were a record-breaking 20,897 eviction cases filed in Franklin County Municipal Court. And thanks to the support of the City of Columbus and others, the Legal Aid Society of Columbus's Tenant Advocacy Project represented more than 2,000 of those families in eviction proceedings. Through this support, the Tenant Advocacy Project was able to provide legal assistance to nearly 10% of families who had cases filed against them in eviction court, and it was closer to 20 to 30% of families who actually entered an appearance in court. We advise them of their legal rights, connect them with community resources, including rental assistance, medical and social services. Additionally, we provide legal representation. In 2022, LASC helped 580 Columbus families to remain housed through contested trials and negotiated settlements and eviction actions. During that same time, we helped an additional 640 families to negotiate move-out agreements that gave them more time to leave their homes and find new stable housing and avoid an eviction judgment. But beyond those numbers, having a tenant walking into eviction court, having never been there before, is a confusing and frightening process. And having an attorney who understands the process stand by you and be able to provide even basic legal advice that you do not have an eviction defense and should try and work something out, either to get caught up on your rent and stay or to move out, is game-changing for many, many tenants. LASC is proud to continue our work with the City of Columbus to provide critical legal representation to Columbus tenants. The city's continued investment in TAP not only allows us to prevent evictions and homelessness, but also to work to make our justice system fairer for groups that are disproportionately facing evictions, including women and children of color, senior citizens, and people with disabilities. Yet, despite the record number of eviction filings in 2022, there was also a record low number of eviction setouts at 744. This is in part due to all of the services that are available for tenants at eviction court, including not only the Legal Aid Society of Columbus's representation and mediation services, but also emergency rental assistance. Throughout the time that emergency rental assistance has been available to tenants in Franklin County, Legal Aid has been able to leverage that assistance to negotiate for much more successful agreements and preserve tenancies. Yet since the first ERA funds were released, there have been tenant families that Legal Aid has worked with whose landlords simply would not accept that money. Some complexes had policies that flat out refused to take rental assistance. Others applied it on a case-by-case basis, accepting rental assistance for some tenants but not others. And this left tenants very confused and anxious, and ultimately tenants who had a real hope of initially preserving their tenancy faced uncertainty and ultimately homelessness when they were not able to convince their landlords to accept that money. Rental assistance funds, in order for them to serve their intended purpose, they must be accepted by landlords. The proposed third-party legislation that Council has voted on this evening would address the gap in the current rental assistance process, ensure that landlords get paid, Columbus families stay housed, and prevent the filing of evictions. With or without rental assistance, not every tenant who ends up in eviction court is able to convince a landlord to take payments that they have had, that they're able to offer. I've seen tenants scrimp and save, borrow money from family members, take out payday loans with ridiculous interest rates, all to get caught up on their rent, walk into court and try to offer every dollar that was owed and have landlords reject it. And as our previous testimony this evening highlighted, in Ohio, that is currently allowable. Without opportunities for Columbus tenants to get caught up in their rent and to exercise that equity that is a part of our case law, Columbus tenants are at a higher risk for eviction and homelessness, and pay to stay will help families succeed in staying in their homes and out of shelters. We face an unprecedented housing crisis in Columbus, and evictions are on the rise, rents are increasing. The need for rental assistance will be greater than ever in the coming months. On behalf of the tenants that I serve and the entire Legal Aid Society of Columbus, I would like to thank Council for considering these important pieces of legislation that work to prevent evictions and homelessness in our community. I would like to thank Council for the continued support of the Tenant Advocacy Project. Legal Aid looks forward to continuing to partner with the City of Columbus to reduce the housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Benson? Thank you once again for your continued advocacy.
Thank you.
And I just want to uplift a point, a data point that Ms. Benson acknowledged, because the model absolutely works. That although we are still experiencing record numbers of evictions, and I will preface this with one set out too many. But if we had over 15,000 evictions filed last year and only 744 set outs, that demonstrates that the model works. And so, once again, I appreciate all of our landlords who have helped us to make the system better. And I would continue to ask residents to reach out if you are in need of assistance right now. With that, I'd move for passage. Oh, do I? I'm sorry.
Here you go.
On 2089?
Gary White.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We do have one speaker. I apologize. Mr. Gary White. Gary White. All right. We will note for the record. Thank you. With that, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Pass.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinance 2146-2023 to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a grant agreement with the Columbus Housing Partnership, doing business as Homeport, in support of the Home Ownership Fund, which will provide targeted down payment assistance and housing counseling services, to authorize an appropriation and expenditure within the Easton TIF Fund, and to declare an emergency. The gap in home ownership rates between Black and white families in the U.S. is bigger today than it was when it was legal to refuse to sell someone a home because of the color of their skin. In 2020, the City of Columbus and Franklin County declared racism to be a public health crisis. At the heart of this declaration has to be the acknowledgement of the reality of systemic racism, the complex interaction of policies, procedures, laws, and institutions that have created disparities in the criminal justice system, employment, healthcare, education, and housing. The reality is that housing insecurity is not evenly distributed across the population. Whether we're talking about evictions, homelessness, or poverty, housing insecurity disproportionately affects people of color, older adults, the disabled, and low-income wage earners. Approximately 54,000 low and moderate income households in Franklin County paid more than half of their income to housing costs, and among those households, 55% of them were Black households. A major racial disparity since Black households only account for 24% of the overall population in Franklin County. The manifestation of these disparities can be identified through the examination of the racial wealth gap, where here in Columbus, residents of color are in greater debt and have less wealth than the city's white residents. We can also identify the disparity if we examine the lack of access to employment opportunities that provide a true living wage. Here in Columbus, nearly 40% of Black workers make just $15,000 or less a year, compared to 14% of white workers. Equity that families have in their home is the main source of wealth for middle-class Americans. Becoming a homeowner is more than just owning a home. It is laying a foundation for building generational wealth and creating family stability and financial security. I am deeply connected to this work at a personal level. My grandparents owned a beautiful brick home in the heart of Dayton's historic community. Like Columbus, Dayton's historic Black communities lack the financial support and public and private investment needed to ensure the vitality and legacy of its residents and their homes. It's personal because I know the reality of eviction and foreclosure looks and feels like failure and often dehumanizing. Unfortunately, my family's story is no different than most Black and historically marginalized low-income families in Columbus, in that the family home, the home that should have or could have created generational wealth, is no longer ours. That is why when we started to create Council's Housing 2023 plan, I knew we had to include home ownership opportunities. By creating pathways to home ownership, we not only impact the family that is purchasing their first home, but we positively impact generations after them. This ordinance was part of 2023 Council's housing initiatives and was led by fellow Women's Caucus leader, Councilmember Barosa de Padilla. I would now like to kick it over to Councilmember Barosa de Padilla.
Thank you, Chair Favor. Since 2015, the rate of home ownership has been declining in the city of Columbus, with less than half of our residents being homeowners. Low-income residents and marginalized individuals have historically been disenfranchised and acutely experienced the effects of redlining. And we know that home ownership is one of the greatest strategies to bridging the wealth gap, promoting economic and social mobility, and creating strong and safe neighborhoods for all. This legislation authorizes the Director of the Department of Development to enter into a grant agreement in the amount of up to $350,000 with Homeport in support of a home ownership fund, which will provide down payment assistance and housing counseling services. As a daughter of immigrant parents who relied on our home as a safety net, and still do, for our entire family, I understand the impact that owning a home can have for a family. That is why we cannot truly talk about housing without discussing the need to create pathways towards home ownership for vulnerable populations. This program will focus on underserved, lower-income communities who have traditionally been left out of home ownership opportunities. These funds will enable at least 120 households to purchase a home by providing funds that they may be used for down payment, closing costs, and our rate buy-downs. Assistance is forgiven after 3 years of owner occupancy. Additionally, housing counseling services will be offered, providing individualized support on topics like contract negotiations, applying for a loan, lender underwriting criteria, budgeting, mortgage amount calculations, and home improvements and upkeep so folks can stay in their homes. I would now like to invite, and if I mess up your name, I so apologize, Lourdes Barroso Padilla, I understand your pain, Anna Tay Gonzago from Ayaco to the podium to speak on this ordinance.
Good evening, President Hardin, Chair Favor, and members of Columbus City Council. My name is Ana Te Kasongo, and last week I joined the Affordable Housing Alliance as the Director of Community Partnerships. Thank you for having me. As a local host of Convergence Columbus, we express our deepest thanks for your consideration for an investment in equitable down payment assistance. Home ownership is a powerful tool for both community development and individual growth. Owning a home creates stability and allows owners to better control their living costs. Furthermore, home ownership is the primary vehicle for building generational wealth. The average homeowner has $255,000 in wealth compared to only $6,300 for renters. This may explain why nearly 3/4 of Americans place owning a home as a key sign of prosperity, higher than having a career, starting a family, or completing college. Unfortunately, buying a home is increasingly difficult. The Columbus Realtors report that our median sale price grew to over $320,000 in June, a 50% jump in just 5 years. Additionally, a significant racial home ownership gap remains, and in Franklin County alone, there exists a 33 percentage point gap in home ownership between white and Black residents. This solvable yet persistent, inequitable, and destabilizing problem led to the formation of Convergence Columbus, with over 100 members aligned in a collective impact model to close these gaps. Its products and programs workstream quickly identified access to robust and flexible down payment assistance as a key tool, and they are not alone. A study from Harvard similarly found that offering down payment assistance could lift 1.1 million Black and Hispanic renters into home ownership. This new program is set to help at least 120 households attain and sustain home ownership. This workstream of lenders, realtors, and realtors, federal regulators, and local nonprofits designed this program to complement Columbus's unique strengths. It will match home buyers' personal savings to help buy a home anywhere in our community, not restricting them to low-income or majority-minority neighborhoods. Homeports was selected as the program's administrator because of their experience, commitment to equitable housing, and access to on-site housing counseling. I want to conclude by reiterating Convergence's thanks to Council and Mayor Ginther for their ongoing support of this vital work. We also want to recognize the partners that will join the City of Columbus in this fund: PNC Bank, Park National Bank, the Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, and the Mortgage Bankers Association. And those investors join Huntington Bank, Fifth Third Bank, and as of today, JP Morgan Chase in supporting the coalition. We continue to welcome additional support from local change makers to expand our impact further. Thank you for your time and consideration this evening.
Thank you, Anna. Welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do my colleagues have any questions or comments? I just want to say thank you for all of the work that HIACO does. Thank you. I'm excited about Convergence. I share in Councilmember Favor's excitement about this particular piece. I know it's something that's near and dear to both of us. I'm only the second homeowner in my family, and I know how life-changing that can be for people, especially when you've rented more than half of your life, and what that can mean and how that can change the trajectory of your family. And so it's not just about getting into that home, it's also how people keep that home over time. So I just want to say thank you again. I'm very excited about this and what this can do for these 120 families and how we can continue to build on this to make home ownership a path for every resident in the City of Columbus. So thank you again. With that, I move for passage.
Second.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, Favor, Remy, President Harden.
Pass.
Thank you. And now I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Mitch Brown.
Thank you, Councilmember. I have in Housing Ordinance 2156, 2023, to authorize the city attorney to modify an existing contract with Columbus Next Generation Corporation to authorize an appropriation and expenditure within the general fund and to declare an emergency. Columbus Next Gen has been working with the City of Columbus, Office of the City Attorney, and the Franklin County Environmental Courts to assist homeowners throughout the city who are elderly and/or disabled to repair code violations on their homes that are in the court system and have been since prior to COVID-19 pandemic. NextGen works with local contractors, encourages minority participation as much as possible, ensuring all contractors are licensed, bonded, and have BWC insurance and are registered with the City of Columbus as a contractor in order to pull necessary permits if needed repairs. Once repairs are complete, NextGen contacts the city code officer that referred properties to the court system to make sure the repairs meet the requirements to close out the current code violations. Repairs range from roof repair, new roofs, gutters, painting, sewer line work, porch and foundation work, cutting down dead trees, overgrown high weeds and branches, and grass. My colleagues and I are pleased to be able to support homeowners who do not have the financial means or physical ability to do such repairs. This ordinance authorizes the extension of the original agreement through December 31st, 2024, and increases the available funding by $500,000 from the general fund. Emergency action is being requested in order to avoid any disruption in exterior home repair. If there are no questions from my colleagues, I move for passage and ask for a voice vote.
Second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Bangston? Yes. Ms. Barosa de Padilla? Yes. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Dorans?
Yes.
Ms. Favor?
Abstain.
Mr. Remy?
Yes.
President Harden?
Yes, ordinance is passed.
I now turn it back over to Councilmember Favor.
Thank you. In just 4 short months, we have passed half, or 6 of the 12 initiatives we laid out in March. It is clear that as a community, we are at an inflection point. Do we accept the status quo, or do we build a more inclusionary and progressive community? At Columbus City Council, we firmly believe we must do the latter. We must continue to stand up, to act, to make the choice again and again to ensure that the principle of housing as a human right becomes a reality in the city of Columbus. Tonight, we approved nearly $9 million in funding to address the city's housing crisis. I am proud of our city. I'd like to thank my colleagues, our dedicated social service organizations, our businesses, and our residents, because it will truly take all of us working together to make change in our community. I am passionate about housing for all because now more than ever, it is critical that we work to not only ensure that we have enough housing to accommodate the projected growth of Columbus, but also working to protect our legacy residents, the residents that have helped to create Columbus's amazing neighborhoods from the effects of gentrification, displacement, and systemic racism that have contributed to the inequities that we see in education, healthcare, employment, and yes, even in housing. The work is not done yet. We have 6 more pieces of legislation that we outlined. I urge you to continue to be engaged, continue to work with our great service providers throughout the city, working to make our neighborhoods stronger, safer, and more affordable. Be someone that says yes in my neighborhood, and share resources with those who need help the most. There's an old African proverb that I am now saying everywhere I go, that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. To solve this housing crisis, we need everyone to be a part of the solution so we can create seismic change for generations to come. Thank you to Council President Harden and my colleagues for their continued support and work on these initiatives. I'd like to thank Andrew Dyer up in the stages up there, Senior Policy Advisor in the Legislative Research Office, who has worked tirelessly on these policies and helped to make them as strong as they are here today. I want to thank my team, Sandeep Jindal, Kendra Aisadu, and Tyler Littlejohn for all of the work that you have done over the last 6 months to get us to this point. Again, to get more information or to access emergency rental assistance dollars, please visit www.renful614.com. To learn more about the Housing for All and 2023 housing initiatives, please visit www.housingforallcbus.com. If there are no questions or comments, I will. There's nothing to move. I'm just going to move back to the other one. Okay. All right. May I go back to page 6?
Sure.
For first read, ordinance 2268.
Sure.
23, to authorize the Director of the Department of Development to execute a grant agreement with Rebuilding Together Central Ohio, doing business as ModCon Living, in an amount up to $270,000 towards providing home repair services to residents of the North Central community, and to authorize an appropriation and expenditure of $270,000 within the Neighborhood Initiative Subfund, and to authorize reimbursement of expenses incurred prior to the execution of the purchase order. I will now turn it over to Councilmember Remy.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Favor. I'm really excited about this program, and this is the North Central Home Repair Program in partnership with ModCon to help homeowners in that neighborhood cover the cost of pre-approved exterior repairs. We hope to roll out some more information about this program in September and look forward to this exciting work that has been really years in the making. So thanks again, Councilmember Favor.
Thank you. If there are no questions or comments, I first move to waive second reading.
Clerk, please call the row.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you. That's all I have in my committees.
Good job, leader. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next committee coming for council is Public Safety. The chair is Councilman Remy. Councilman Flores.
Thank you very much, Council President Harden. I have Ordinance 2167, 2023, to authorize the Director of the Department of Public Safety to enter into a contract with Crowd and Conflict Management Limited to implement the first phase of Enable Columbus, a project that aims to develop research expertise and enhance crowd management strategies, foster dialogue between police and demonstrators, and safeguard First Amendment rights in the city of Columbus, to authorize the expenditure of $94,200 from the general fund, to waive the competitive bidding provisions of the Columbus City Code, and to declare an emergency. The policing of First Amendment crowd events has been a major driver of recent challenges to police legitimacy, both in Columbus and nationwide. In response to the civil unrest of 2020, police agencies across the U.S. have therefore been reevaluating their crowd management strategies. Accordingly, the Columbus Division of Police has developed Enable Columbus, which is a partnership between Crowd and Conflict Management and the Columbus Division of Police, the Ohio State University, Keele University, and the City of Columbus. Enable Columbus aims to utilize this knowledge production partnership to embed and enhance the CPD's new science-led approach to crowd policing, develop new research expertise based at OSU, gather primary data on the effectiveness and limitations of the new approach, use this evidence to further enhance CPD's crowd management strategies, foster dialogue between police and demonstrators, help safeguard First Amendment rights in the position of the City of Columbus as providing the nationally leading approach to crowd management policing. The CPD Dialogue Unit has been in operation since October 2022 and is now the primary tactic of the agency's new science-led operational response to First Amendment events. Their mission is to facilitate the freedom of expression by building community partnerships, enhancing two-way communication and police legitimacy, improving problem-solving capacity, augmenting command decision-making, and de-escalating tensions. Preliminary deployments of the new unit indicate the new approach is likely to prove highly beneficial. However, more work is required to evaluate, embed, and expand the approach. I am really excited about this. This has been, we've been briefed about this many times, and just watching our officers in the blue vests get out and really work within the community to de-escalate any type of events that specifically look like they could have gone to a different level prior to this type of work being done. And so I'm going to turn this over to Director Pashotti, and I know Commander Mabry's here as well. So Director Pashotti.
Council President Harden, Council Chair Remy, we are thrilled to be able to bring the expert on crowd management strategies here to Columbus. I'm going to ask Commander Mabry to come up and say a few short things about this, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Council President, Chair Remy, Director Pashotti, thank you very much for the opportunity to come talk about this exciting research and this opportunity to put Columbus on a worldwide map. We all have been told in school to think local or enact global or some version of that, right? And so here's an opportunity for Columbus to do that. In 2021, we were sent to Europe to study with Professor Stott to learn best practices across Europe. Well, how do those apply here in Columbus? Well, that's a good question, because we had a chance to go around Europe and learn how to do it right and how to do it wrong. And from that, we've come back to try to implement this here. We've had several high-profile events that we've seen in our local news, and our whole goal is to live out who we say we are. The City of Columbus gave different expectations on what they wanted from us, and we've responded to that by bringing in this research here and best practice. One of the things the dialogue unit says is honest dialogue requires honest intent. And so our intent is to listen to what the citizens of Columbus have told us and provide and facilitate First Amendment activity in the City of Columbus. What we'll do by bringing Professor Stott here is measure that to see if through science, if what's happened in Europe will work right here in Columbus, Ohio, and what we believe will pour out from Columbus to be the model to be used across the United States. And so what we need, the three ingredients we need to make this successful, we have here in Columbus. One, a major city police department. We have that check mark. Two, a highly respected research university, The Ohio State University. And then three, the leading expert in the world through Professor Clifford Stott on crowd psychology. And so through this, we hope to make a premier program in the United States where we facilitate First Amendment activity and give the people of Columbus a voice.
How many people are on the dialogue team today?
Well, our goal was 25, and we recruited 45 members to this team. And the group we've had represent Columbus very well, and when they've been able to engage with the crowds who come here to express themselves very positively. And the relationships we've built, relationships we didn't have 2 years ago, we now have today, and people are able to come to Columbus and have a safe environment to express themselves and air their grievances.
Yeah, very excited.
Yeah.
You wanna say anything?
I mean, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I think it's night and day, obviously. We learned a lot from 2020. I think we admitted that we could have done things better. We know that we could have done better. The work that your team has done, I wish everybody could have the briefing that I got on the dialogue team. I think it really is transformational. It's cutting edge. It is working. When we had their protesters here, the Nazi protesters protesting the Pride March or the drag event, those folks who 2 years ago were calling to say they did not feel comfortable with Columbus Division of Police called me specifically to thank us for the work of the dialogue team. I think it's that kind of work of winning hearts and minds and creating a space where folks feel seen, but also, most importantly, feel safe. Just something I'm very grateful for. And really, we cannot lift up, highlight, talk about enough the work of this new dialogue team in the Columbus Division of Police. It really is exceptional.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the work.
Thank you all for your support. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Next, I have ordinance 2231, 2023, to authorize the Director of the Department of Public Safety to enter into contract with Motorola Solutions, doing business as Vigilant Solutions, for the purchase of commercial license subscriptions for the investigative data platform, to waive the competitive bidding provisions of the Columbus City Codes, to authorize an expenditure of $99,995 from the Law Enforcement Seizure Fund, and to declare an emergency. This purchase is manifestly impractical to bid because we currently use this software and other law enforcement agencies use similar Motorola licenses, which will allow Columbus Police to share important information with other local agencies as crime often crosses jurisdictional borders. Therefore, the Division of Police is requesting a bid waiver in accordance with Chapter 329 of the Columbus City Code. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Pass.
Next, if we could go back to page 6, I have ordinance 2242, 2023, to authorize the Finance and Management Director to associate all general budget reservations resulting from this ordinance with the appropriate universal term contract purchase agreement and Brown Enterprise Solutions, LLC, for the purchase of computers, monitors, and accessories on behalf of the Department of Public Safety, Division of Support Services, to authorize the expenditure of $179,303.12 from the Division of Support Services General Fund operating budget. This is used to purchase computers, monitors, and accessories with the appropriate universal term purchase contract agreement established with Brown Enterprise LLC. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
That is all I have in public safety. With your permission, can I move on to environment?
Please.
Thank you very much. I have ordinance 2185, 2023, to authorize the Director of the Department of Finance and Management to associate all general budget reservations resulting from this ordinance with the appropriate universal term contract purchase agreement for front end and rear end loading refuse trucks for the Division of Refuse Collection with Ohio Machinery Company, doing business as Ohio Peterbilt, to authorize the expenditure of up to $3,040,618 from the refuse bond fund for these trucks and to declare an emergency. Using the universal term contract purchase agreement this will purchase 2 Peterbilt Heil 33-yard front-end loading, 2 Peterbilt Heil 42-yard front-end loading, and 2 Peterbilt Heil 32-yard rear-end loading compressed natural gas refuse trucks. This purchase has been approved by the Division of Fleet Management. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Next, I have ordinance 2191, 2023, to authorize the Director of Finance and Management to establish a purchase order with FIDA Freightliner Columbus, Inc. for purchase of 1 diesel-powered Isuzu NPRHD flatbed for the Division of Refuse Collection, to authorize the expenditure of up to $94,378 from the Refuse Bond Fund, to authorize the waiver of the competitive bidding requirements of the Columbus City Code, and to declare an emergency. The Division of Refuse Collection Container Warehouse provides services throughout the city of Columbus, fixing existing containers and supplying new refuse and recycling containers to all Columbus residents. Due to long lead times associated with the production and delivery of new vehicles that need repairs and/or the replacement of current vehicles, this critical operation does not have enough functional vehicles to fulfill daily operations. Therefore, the purchase of a readily available vehicle appropriate for this type of operation is necessary to avoid the interruption of city services. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
And next, I have ordinance 2202, 2023, to authorize the Director of Finance and Management to associate all general budget reservations resulting from this ordinance with the appropriate universal term contract purchase agreements for knuckle boom waste trucks for the Division of Refuse Collection with Ohio Machinery Company, Ohio Peterbilt, to authorize the expenditure of up to $1,987,487 from the Refuse Bond Fund for these trucks and to declare an emergency. Using the universal term purchase contract agreement, this will purchase 5 compressed natural gas knuckle boom waste trucks. This purchase has been approved by the Division of Fleet Management. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
And if we could go back to page 7, I have ordinance 2291, 2023, to authorize the city clerk to enter into a grant agreement with the Garden Club project and to authorize an appropriation and expenditure within the Neighborhood Initiative Subfund. The Garden Club project was founded by teampreneur Teleria Watkins II of Tiger Mushroom Farms. The mission of Tiger Mushroom Farms, or the Garden Club project, is to help end hunger and encourage kids to eat healthier. The Garden Club has encouraged youth to grow food by donating over 300 seed kits to kids at farmers markets and schools. Telerio also started a small garden for a local elementary school, from which over 300 pounds of food has been donated to families in need. Telerio is expanding his urban farm by adding a high tunnel to extend the harvest season. Telerio will teach 30 students from the COSI platform program how to grow mushrooms and produce this summer. He will introduce students to careers in agribusiness. I'd like to thank Councilmember Brown for his partnership in this to help support this really great program. You get anything you want to add? Mushrooms, that's right, yeah. So if there are no questions or comments from my colleagues, I move for passage.
Is there a second? Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
That's all I have on environment. Can I move on to rules and reference?
Please.
Next, I have ordinance 2275, 2023, to amend various sections in chapters 501, 573, and 585 of the Columbus City Codes to allow flexibility in license renewal and alter frequency of regular meetings and quorum for the Vehicle for Hire Board and Mobile Food Vending Advisory Board. Currently, the city is proposing new minor changes to further update the code. This ordinance will make the following changes. If a licensee is late renewing a license, the code would now allow the licensing section the flexibility to consider extreme hardship as a reason to allow for the renewal rather than the licensee register for a new license. It will alter the requirements for quorum for the Vehicle for Hire and Mobile Food Vending Boards by allowing quorum to be half plus one of the current membership of the board rather than a specific number representing full membership. This would make quorum more frequent as there are times when not all board seats are filled. It will change the frequency of Vehicle for Hire board meetings to quarterly rather than monthly. Additional meetings are still allowed to be called in situations where the board chair or members call for such. Overall, these changes will further the city's administration's and council's efforts to update and streamline the licensing code and modernize regulations for the city's businesses and residents. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Pass.
And finally, this evening, I have ordinance 2297, 2023, to amend the Columbus District map to reflect any annexations to the city from 2021 through July 2023, to enact Chapter 104 of the Columbus City Codes, Administrative Code, to memorialize the Columbus District map within the Columbus City Codes, and to declare an emergency. In December 2021, the Columbus District map was adopted by Columbus City Council. Section 7.3 of the Columbus City Charter requires that if territory is annexed into the city after the adoption of the districting map, council shall by ordinance, which shall be an emergency measure, amend the districting plan to attach the territory to the contiguous council district sharing the largest boundary with the territory. If territory is detached from the city after adoption of this districting plan, council shall by ordinance, which shall be an emergency measure, amend the districting plan to detach the territory from the council district within which it previously resided. This ordinance amends the Columbus District map to reflect any annexations that have taken place between 2021 and July 2023. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I move for passage.
Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed.
Thank you very much. That is all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next committee to come before council is the Finance Committee. I chair that committee. We have three ordinances in this evening. First is ordinance 1990-2023, is to authorize the Director of Finance and Management on behalf of the Office of Construction Management to enter into construction contract with 2K General Company for the Health Department Expansion Renovation Project to waive the provision of the Columbus City Codes, Chapter 378, in regards to the approval of the Community Benefits Agreement Advisory Committee to authorize the transfers and expenditures up to $21,493,900 within the Safety General Obligation Bond Fund and the Health General Obligation Bond Fund and the Construction Management Capital Improvement Fund, and to authorize the amendment to the 2023 Capital Improvement Project. This project involves a full interior renovation of the historic Health Department. The fantastic Health Department is more important now than ever, and these renovations will ensure that they have a safe, clean space that supports the crucial work that they are doing. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Hearing none, I move for passage. Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is ordinance 2219-2023, is to authorize the city auditor to modify and extend the contract with On Acute Consulting and to modify the contract for Microsoft licensing and services through Dale Marketing LP, to waive the competitive bidding provisions of the Columbus City Code, to extend such contracts, to authorize the expenditure of $450,000 from the auditor bond fund, and to declare an emergency. Our auditor's office utilizes the Dynamic 365 software to manage our city's finances. Given their familiarity with the software and the need to continue services without interruption, this legislation will renew the licenses needed to continue using Dynamics 365 and related applications. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues on this piece? Hearing none, I move for passage. Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Thank you. Passed. The final item in the Finance Committee tonight is ordinance 2283-2023. It's to authorize the Director of Finance and Management to execute those documents necessary to acquire fee simple title and lesser interest in two real estate property identified as Franklin County Tax Parcel 010201154 located at 4285 Groves Road, to amend the 2023 capital improvement budget to authorize the transfer of cash and appropriation within the Construction Management Capital Improvements Fund, Fund 7733, to authorize the expenditure of $2,650,000 from the Construction Management Capital Improvement Fund, Fund 7733, and to declare an emergency. This ordinance allows the city to purchase a parcel of land that we will use to expand facility management divisions and support other city departments. Are there any questions or comments on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I move for passage. Clerk, please call the row.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed. And we will go to the final committee rules and reference. I have one ordinance in rules and reference. I have ordinance 2265-2023. It's to amend chapter 111 of the Columbus City Codes pertaining to the ability of council to hold virtual meetings. When COVID hit, we learned that we did not have strong provisions in place to get work done during extended emergencies. Most of our remote engagement was done through an emergency state order that is now expired. Last November, Columbus residents voted on a number of charter proposals to help modernize and improve how our city council does business, all of which passed overwhelmingly. One of those proposals was giving council the flexibility to meet virtually when necessary. That item passed by Columbus voters by 76%. This ordinance will enact that proposed change that our city voters voted for, allowing members to be virtual during emergencies. This change will help our members continue to participate even in the event of sickness or other unforeseen challenges, while still ensuring that our meetings are open and accessible to all. In making this change, we are following the lead of other cities like Cleveland, Akron, Dayton, and Cincinnati, who have done the same. Let me be clear. I fully expect that members will be here in person every week. I don't want to see anyone calling in. That's funny. Somebody wrote a joke in my talking points. We are committed to being here, being accessible and available to the people of Columbus, and in-person meetings are part of that. This is clear. This allows us, especially if we have a member get sick, or in those situations where we've had this, where two members were sick, where we almost had to cancel a council meeting because we didn't have the votes to pass important legislation. This would allow us to still meet and allow those members to vote from home. This is an important piece of legislation that allows us the continuity to move legislation, to do the work of the city, and to keep us all safe. We have two speakers on this piece of legislation. The first speaker is, I know Mr. Motil's here, Mr. Joe Motil.
Good evening, President Harden, members of City Council, Joe Motil, 167 West Cook Road, Columbus, Ohio. It is very hypocritical to complain about our Republican state legislature restricting women's rights with abortion laws, don't say gay bills, critical race theory, gerrymandering, and issue 1. Yet City Hall Democrats are doing the exact same thing by restricting citizens' rights and to solely conduct virtual City Council meetings to keep from facing the public in person. The Charter Review Commission meetings were a charade. Out of the 12 meetings, the public was only permitted to give public comments at 2 of those meetings. And the second meeting violated sunshine laws by only providing a 15-hour notice instead of the required 24-hour notice. It is bad enough that the charter allows for provisions to appoint council members to fill vacated seats. I believe 40 of the past 44 council members gained office first through an appointment. This process is a slap in the face of Section 2 of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. You have passed laws to maintain control and power in City Hall and stripping Columbus residents of their rights to equally participate in a democracy. Campaign finance laws allow for unlimited in-kind contributions along with a maximum donation of $15,499 per reporting period. Candidates are prohibited from using taxpayer-paid public access television. You allow former city council officials and city employees to serve as lobbyists. You and the mayor accept campaign contributions from developers, special interest groups, and persons who have a financial interest in city business while such business is pending before city council. Columbus voters know that the mayor spends the majority of his time making unethical and corrupt deals behind closed doors already. For instance, the Crew Stadium, Ohio Health 315 ramp, Little Turtle roadway project, Red Flex, rejecting the will of the voters by turning ownership of Nationwide Arena over to the taxpayer in the recent $54 million merchant building public bailout. And that's just to name a few. You silence public scrutiny by adjourning the regular city council meeting prior to allowing public comment so that the listening and viewing public cannot hear what a taxpayer resident of Columbus has to say. The November City Council fake district elections are a farce and completely undemocratic. The fact that the entire city electorate gets to vote for a candidate in all 9 districts is nothing more than an extension of our current at-large elections, and it is set up this way to continue control and power of the city's current autocratic city government. If Columbus is to have true district representation, then only the electorate within the boundaries of a particular district should be permitted to vote only for a candidate within their own district. I am against tonight's portion of this charter amendment that was created as an opportunity to further restrict the citizens of Columbus' rights of properly participating and maintaining a true democracy and allows both elected and officials to escape the pressure of facing the public in person. I heard what you said earlier, that you would all be here, and again, I do not want to see a virtual city council meeting solely, which is why I'm opposed to this. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. The next speaker to come before council is Don Bellows.
You guys have a nice double header here, back-to-back testimony. You know, I thought you guys were fans. Banks isn't even leaving. I thought you guys were fans of my testimony, and reading this legislation, it feels like you're not. You know what I mean? Like, I get that, you know, people could get sick and they could call in and stuff, and maybe that should be written into the statute, and it should be mandatory. But right now, as it's written, like, you guys will have the option to go fully virtual for any reason whatsoever, you know, an emergency. Well, what's going to be the emergency? Who declares the emergency? It's going to be up to you. It's going to be up to you guys. You know, so let's say you guys got a hot issue coming. Let's say it's a Columbus City, you know, we're going to bring the genocide statue back, a Christopher Columbus, and we're going to put him back up there. But now, oh, well, it's an emergency and we're going virtual. You know, I mean, you guys, well, I criticize you guys. It's a finely tuned machine in here, right? Like, you all were appointed. Nobody in here is like actual citizens. Everybody in here coming to testify is like on the city payroll. I'd probably more likely to see Jesus Christ resurrected on the 6 bus or walking down Sullivan Avenue than I ever would seeing any of you guys. I mean, you know, we saw each other at Tommy's a couple months ago. I mean, there's the Tommy's truce, you know. Coming in here and bitching is the only kind of time a guy like me can get discourse with my highly elected officials. And if it goes to virtual, hey, that just sucks, you know. And I get it. You can say, you know, it's not going to happen, or we're just take our word for it. You're burying this legislation at the end of a 3-hour meeting, 3.5-hour meeting, on the meeting before you guys go on break for a month. And that like, to me, that just like rings alarm bells. Like, it's shady. It's not going to be covered on the local news by any means. I mean, how many people know this legislation is going on right now? People in this room. Maybe the 3 people watching on on, on Facebook right now. And you guys you're not accountable at the polls. You don't have to campaign. You raise all your money from firms with business before the city. And you're even to look that up is like unlocking a maze. It's way, you can't even look up that information without knowing exactly what to look for and how to operate the little hobgoblin system you have. It's a credibility problem, man. I know you guys are gonna sit up here, I'm a crank, I can see the size but it sucks because if you go to all virtual and stuff, and that way people can just hit the mute button, man. If I'm sitting on Zoom right now, I hit the mute. And if you can't deal with people in person, then get out of politics, man. Go be a realtor.
Well, thank you. I just want to reiterate again what the purpose of this is for. We've had circumstances even in this session where we had 2 council members that were sick, and if not for that us being able to allow one of the sick members to come in here and vote, we would have had to cancel the council meeting that afternoon. We have a flexibility that was given to us by 76% of our voters to allow for us to go virtual when there are emergencies. I am the council president. I will use that authority if this passes to allow for council members to vote by proxy virtually when necessary. I think that's all I'm going to say. Are there any other questions or comments on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I move for passage. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
Passed. So obviously, this is the last meeting before, as we go on legislative break. A reminder, our council offices are still open. The only thing that we are breaking from is meeting here at 5 o'clock on Mondays. We will still be in the community. We will still be in our offices. Our staffs will still be available. So we look forward to engaging with you over the next several weeks. We will return in person, in session, September 11th. From the legislative break. Want to remind everybody to go vote. There is an election on August 8th that we need folks to go vote. And the last thing that I would say also, over break there will be renovations happening on this dais. When you come back, the dais will look a little different. To be prepared for the addition of 2 additional council members. That renovation will happen over August. So there will be 9 desks up here, 7 council members until voters elect the 3 new council members come November. So just want to wish everybody a safe remainder of the summer. And if there are no further business, I move to adjourn. Is there a second? Recess. I apologize. Is there a second? Second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bangston, Barosa de Padilla, Brown, Dorans, favor, Remy, President Harden.
We are in recess. We have 1 speaker.